Recording in progress.
All right, I'll call to order the June 13th Public Works meeting. Can I get a roll call?
Alderman Weggie.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice. Here. Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderman Erger, absent.
Okay, move on to approval of the agenda. Any changes? If not, I'll see good by acclamation. Moving the citizen comment.
There's no one online.
Okay, this is going great. Moving the report of committee chair. I do not have any report. Alderwoman Tice.
No report.
Alderman Gould.
No report.
Okay, wow, we're moving right along. City administrator report. Installation of gates at 8700 Manchester Road.
We were expecting Jeff Daniels. Someone come in? He's the owner of 8700 Manchester, the office building that backs up to Brentwood Park. We have been meeting with him since Brentwood Park opened, and particularly the Destination Playground. And there have been patrons of our park that have been using his private parking lot. And he would rather not see that at all. And as you know, he has had a tow truck parked on his parking lot. And so the more use it gets, because he doesn't want to have to continue to deal with this issue, he has suggested that he wants to install gates to both driveways into his lot. And so I had the police chief, the fire chief, Dan, and Eric meet with them to get a better idea of what he's proposing. Would it be acceptable to us? He did say he would grant all city employees, police and fire, public works, parks, that need access to the back of his parking lot, even MSD, Ameren, all of them, access there, but he wants our patrons who use it to stop. There was a day when we were out there where we could see that gradually the temporary parking lot on the south was almost full, yet people were still coming into his lot. So he also suggested that if we were in agreement, the city were in agreement, he would like to put in a sign that points an arrow to our temporary lot, at least now until the gates come up. He would incur the cost of putting up the gates. But furthermore, he also wants to stop people that walk down, that hill from Arby's, because we see parents with kids and babies trying to, walk it down. He would like to see them stop using his parking lot to walk into our park. So on the back end, starting from, where that gate goes up for MSD access, he would like to put a fence there as well, all the way around to the light pole on the other end of his parking lot. And he would have to incur that cost. There's a fence there already, very beautiful decorative fence that we put up as part of our project. So he would like that as well. And so I have Dan, Eric, and Ed, Assistant Fire Chief. They can speak to their thoughts, concerns, if any, on that. So anybody want to step up?
Before we get into all of that, did he indicate his concern? Is it mostly a liability?
It is a liability.
For him
For
and
him.
his insurance? Got it.
Right.
Okay.
And he is also putting in cameras. So when the last incident happened where there were 4 cars on the lot where someone came in overnight and took all the tires off and then used some of the bricks from his retaining wall to prop up those vehicles, he said in the 45 years he's owned that property, it has never happened. And so we talked to him, Major Simpson and I talked to him about flock cameras, whether he would want to, because you can see better, and direct access for the police department, that maybe he might want to consider that as well. So it's liability. That's one of his
And
primary
safety, yeah.
reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, during the meeting, I think the couple takeaways I had, and Dan and Chief could obviously chime in as well, is that we wanted to make sure that if he does put up gates, about access. in particular fire access to make sure they can get their truck in there, the ladder truck, make sure they have the radius and everything, and he said he'd be happy to work with us with that. There were some questions. I know Dan and him talked a little bit about the fact that the eastern entrance is still considered Mary Avenue, and he, I think, disputed that a little bit, whether it really is Mary Avenue or whether it was sub-Mary Avenue, something like that. And so he said that that would be a conversation you got to have with St. Louis County because he could have that conversation. And then when we talked about the gates and things like that, he really kind of made the statement that he's still considering. And he wasn't sure whether or not he was going to move forward with the gates. I would say that my impression is, you know, if things temper down his lot, he'll probably be okay. If he has more impact still, if people still park there, I think he might be a little bit more inclined. The one day Bull and I was there, that was right after those two larger signs he put up had been blown down after the big storm. And so that's when we saw more people coming in. And when we told them, they're very nice and moved. And then when we were there Friday, we saw some people turn in and then immediately turn out once they saw the sign. So I think he might be seeing how the signage works, but I obviously can't speak for Jeff. Anything else, you guys? I think that's what we took away from it.
And this is informational only because this would go through P and Z and site plan review and all that anyway,
Correct.
right?
And he did know that. We had that discussion as well, so I forgot to mention that. So he knows that anything he wants to do would have to go through P and Z.
Yeah, Nancy?
So as long as, particularly the safety, like as long as fire, in my opinion, like police and fire probably are the highest priority to be able to get through the gates. And then certainly, you know, your staff, the Public Works, MSD, as long as they can all get in, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I did, like when you walk through there, on the park side, after you come through the walkway, I mean, yeah, you're looking at a parking lot, but it's just so open and it's so welcoming and you're walking into a park. And I would really hate to like walk in and like, oh, it's walled off. Like, what kind of place is this that we have to wall off a parking lot? So I guess just, I mean, the P and Z issue, and I don't know what's allowed, but I think the fence that's there for MSD, it's it's black, it's really lovely. It has the pretty flowers near it. But I just would hate to walk in and just see like big fence.
Yeah, I think when we discussed it with him, he was talking about just taking the fence that's on the back of his property, which is the fence that was installed during construction. It's kind of a black aluminum type fence, and extending that.
Right,
So
it's a nice fence, it's a lovely
Yeah.
fence. I just, I'm not a big fan of fences to begin with, and I just, you know, if the front's blocked and you can't get in, or if he wanted to do something so that people didn't walk down from Manchester into his lot, I think I can appreciate that, but to come in from Mary Avenue, you know, underneath the tunnel and walk in and just all of a sudden, it's like a whole ton of fence on the right. I just think it's not the welcome that we would want to present going into Brentwood Park.
And if something were to happen like that, we could work on landscaping, you know, kind of hiding it with landscaping and things like that if we needed to. There's a lot of things we could do to still make it feel welcoming if we have to do that. But my impression is after that meeting that we had with him is that he really is kind of a wait and see of how it's going to go. And, you know, now the temporary lots are up and people are seeming to be more used to going to there. And if we do add another permanent parking structure and those things, I think he'll be okay.
Where would the gates be positioned on his lot? Because what I don't want to have is people queued up on Manchester waiting to get in because the gates aren't open yet, and then you're holding up traffic. So ideally, you pull into the lot, and then there's a buffer to where you can wait for the gate to open and then get to the.
We talked about the fact that the fence would be near the back of where the actual start of the parking lot is, and the importance of having a turn radius, so that way if you were a park patron and you accidentally turned down there, you'd be able to turn around and get back out to Manchester. So
Right.
that was stuff that we did discuss.
And I'll just add, as part of the planning and development review, site plan review, we would have our traffic engineer look at that so that traffic doesn't back up on Manchester or on Mary for that, yeah.
I mean, I think that, you know, whether or not the Eastern Drive is technically Mary Avenue anymore, or the only place that it accesses is there or MSD. You know, I guess it's questionable whether or not it needs to be Mary Avenue still or not. I mean, Mary along the whole stretch has been chopped up.
Well,
So,
Dan, do you want to, Dan did some survey, or,
I mean, according to the county, it looks like it is still plotted as Mary Avenue.
It is, and it was on the MoDOT plan, so when TWM did the design, it stayed Mary. So if you're out there, you'll notice there's a stop bar, there's a stop sign, but on his western side, it's a private entrance, so Mary didn't go away. And Ameren now also can get access to their underground facilities in that area.
And is there, if it doesn't get conveyed to him and have access only, you know, put a gate there, is there any way that entrance is cut off to his parking lot or not?
Technically, you could, since that Mary belongs to the city, you know, it's public right of way. So you could put the gate such that it's separate from the parking lot.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out a way that we don't have to get into vacating in, you know, all of the complexities of all of that just because we want to get people to park where they are supposed to park, you know. Seems like a lot of complexity for something that should be, it should work itself out as people get used to it. But, okay. Well.
Okay. Thank you all. All right, we'll move on to the next item, the master plan presentation.
So Scott and Jay from SWD are here to kind of go through the master plan. I know you guys have talked to them a few times, and I appreciate all the input you guys have given. But they're going to go through kind of where we're at in the master plan process, next steps, which is really kind of, you know, if we feel comfortable with this, moving it on to the Board of Aldermen in the July meeting, and then really getting in a place where we're ready to approve what the master plan is going to be for the next 10 to 15 years. So I will pass it on to them, and obviously we can talk more when they're done.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. We thought, I know you've all seen this in a bit of detail already, but we kind of summarized it and thought we'd just kind of go over the highlights and really talk more about kind of how the flow of the documents coming together and the pieces that are in there, and kind of give you that overview with a lot of the detail on the recommendation side as well. So, you know, all along we've been kind of aligning with the goals that we established early on. And from a process standpoint, we are kind of at the end now. We are finalizing what we had kind of called task 4, step 4, the recommendations. We had the public meeting last week, and now we're sort of taking the feedback from the survey, from that meeting, and the recommendations, and building that into the action plan, which is really our last sort of deliverable piece for the document, which is putting some prioritization to recommendations, putting costing at a high level, sort of order of magnitude costing to park improvements, and really putting together an action plan that Eric and the Parks and Recreation team can use to think about next steps in prioritization and moving forward. So we will do that over the next week or so. We will then finalize the document, and the intent is to have everything wrapped up, you know, into this month, into early July, and take it to the board in July for presentation. So we are nearing the end here. So just kind of a step back in the process that we used. Obviously, data collection was the first step along the way, and many forms of that, both, you know, in person, being out in the parks, touring the parks with staff, looking at existing documentation. And as we get into the recommendations, you'll see that we really did go back and look at the previous master plan. We looked at the comp plan, you know, the Rogers Parkway, you know, feasibility plan, all all those planning efforts that kind of set the groundwork for this master plan and integrated those into the plan. So looking at those plans and studies, and then just setting up the base and moving forward with the community profile. Engagement was a big part of it. We've talked about engagement throughout and all the different forms. I think, the key thing with engagement, as we're at this point looking backwards, is that, we used a lot of online website and some survey information there. We did the statistically validated survey, which from where we are now is going to be important because we did hold public meetings. The more formal public meetings we had attendance. Would we have liked to have had more participation? Sure, always do. Sometimes that's a sign of, people are happy with what they have. If they're not coming out to tell you what they don't like, that usually means they're happy. And I think we did hear a lot of that in some of the informal and formal feedback that we received, specifically with the care and the condition of the parks and the system as a whole. But that statistically validated survey, as we move into this action plan, is going to be a document that we'll reference back to when we start to think about priorities and what people said that they wanted to see, just because the turnout at the public meetings maybe wasn't as high as we would have liked. But the informal events, especially being out of Brentwood Park for both the ribbon cutting on the park and then the opening of the destination play, we did get a lot of engagement at both of those events, which was pretty exciting. So, we did prepare a couple of takeaways of what the engagement process told us, and all in, we did have engagement with several hundred individuals through face-to-face as well as online and through the survey. So we did have a lot of good feedback, and as I mentioned, a lot of that was overwhelmingly positive about where the city's going, about what has happened since the last plan, the offerings, the opportunities that people have. But we also heard that there was desires for more. A lot of that focused on trails and connectivity. A lot of it focused on upgrading and improving some of the amenities within the parks, restrooms, playgrounds, continuing that. And then thinking about with Brentwood Park coming online and the opportunities for like a Mount Calvary and some of the other property that maybe hasn't been developed that could be part of the parks. From a programming standpoint, it was focused more on maybe expanding some classes in the fitness and wellness, but special events seem to be the real key, as noted by the ding. That people really appreciate those, and so thinking about where those go and how to expand those. And we didn't hear a lot of people that had negative things to say. People who didn't participate were more tied to just balancing schedules and trying to find time to be out there. One interesting comment that we did hear was people not being aware of what opportunities were out there, which surprised us because there are so many different methods that the city uses to get information out and share information. So sometimes that might just be people not having the interest or level of work. But we did explore that a bit. But at the same time, we did hear that the communication efforts that the city does use are very successful. We did hear that the actual guide was really important to people, which nowadays it's all about being online, but there is still that people like that physical guide. So it is still valued and used quite a bit. So once we had the data and input, and as we kept collecting, we did our level of assessment that we talked about last time we were here. So various steps with that, but we started with an overall assessment of the parks. We did the market assessment. We reviewed programs and offerings, and then we did the analysis to kind of create some structure to where we would go to pull forward. And from the bigger aspect, the takeaways from the needs determination, which included public engagement, there was a lot of overlap. So the first few on here you'll see align with what we heard from the public, which was the amount of feedback that we got, the level of satisfaction, some of the priorities. When we get down to the bottom of the list here, a few of the things that we saw from those different aspects of the assessment and the analysis. On the market side of it, there is the population and the capacity within the city to look to expand some of the offerings. It's kind of aligning those with what the needs are will be the key there. And that there is a high level of satisfaction and dedication, satisfaction with the quality and care of the parks and facilities, And through our engagement with staff, a high level of dedication and commitment to that. But as the department and the system continues to grow, a Brentwood Park, a Mount Calvary, other opportunities, there is a stress and a demand on operations and maintenance that will need to be considered and looked at as you move forward. And then kind of rolling into that, the opportunities for expanding just awareness of what opportunities are out there, what events and programs are provided, and the partnerships both that the city has, but even from the cooperative side of it with Maplewood and Richmond Heights, and what people have access to that maybe they're unaware of, or because it's not offered through Brentwood, don't see it as an opportunity for them. So that led us to recommendations. And so we've kind of organized the recommendations into 5 focus areas based on the feedback and the areas of interest that we heard. And those were focusing on parkland themselves, so both the existing parks as well as undeveloped parkland. Trails and connectivity was the second group of recommendations for the focus area. Programming and events, or special events. And then the last 2, facilities, which kind of goes hand in hand with programming. And then operations, which is sort of an overlay across all of this. And that's the operations section is what this action plan sort of ties to quite a bit as well. So we're still refining and finalizing that category, but the other 4 categories all have sort of implementation specific recommendations to it. So we have a series of recommendations within each of those focus areas, and as a way to think about how we could assess the impact that those recommendations will have, we again went back to the survey and identified 6 sort of community values or tenets that we could align, and we could look at recommendations and compare them to almost in a matrix form, where we'd have a recommendation and then we could have the tenets or the values across the top, and kind of say, okay, what does this recommendation align with? Where are we advancing these priorities the community had? The interesting part of that is that those values that came out of the survey from the public also aligned almost directly with the core values that Parks and Recreation has as part of their mission and vision. So there was a real alignment there that tied to it well. So on this graphic we have up here the sort of bold lettered value statements are what came out of the survey. The ones next to it in kind of the gray and italicized are the core values of Parks and Recreation. So they really do tie well together. And so we saw that as a real strength that we can carry forward into the assessment and the recommendation side. So kind of we want to do here is kind of go through sort of the high level recommendation structure that we proposed, and we can definitely stop and talk in more detail if you like. But so starting with parkland, and I'm going to let kind of Scott get up and talk a bit about parks, but we'll go through each of these sections and kind of hit on the key areas of each of those recommendation sections.
Yep. So I'll kind of talk us through each of these focus areas. And we're going to start with parkland. That's for both existing parks and undeveloped parks. A lot of this we presented, it's kind of what we presented at the open house just a little over a week ago. So this should be familiar. But as Jay mentioned, we have each of these focus areas broken down into more broader categories of recommendations. So you see here additional parkland, acquisition, improvements to parks, and then within each of those broad categories, we have more specific, whether it's concept plans or more specific recommendations. So for additional parkland in particular, we had identified a special use park as one of those elements that is mainly focused on a skate park. Within the concept plans that we provided, there's several potential areas where we think that kind of amenity could fit. As well, a new pocket park or play lot. The previous master plan identified the western portion of the city kind of in need of some additional parkland space. Mount Calvary definitely provides that north of Litzener, but also looking for opportunities to incorporate park space, infill park space within the area south of Litzener. Acquisition of parkland, whether that be for expanding different amenities or allowing for new programming within existing parks. That could also be focused on connectivity. So trails and connectivity was a very high priority with our engagement efforts. So seeking out opportunities to help provide those connections is going to be a priority recommendation here as well. The following pages I'll go through are more the concept plans with park-specific recommendations for both the existing and undeveloped parks. So with Brentwood Sports Complex, we developed 3 options here, and those were organized by levels of intensity or levels of change. So the first option is more of a lesser intense option, more kind of maintaining the programming as is. So maintaining it for baseball, rec league softball, and then flexible use for soccer, youth soccer. And then we'd also propose with that improving the comfort station that's existing there to improve the conditions, better functionality, better storage, and then also improve the woodland and the stream bank along Deer Creek as well. Recognizing that with this option, there'll still be some ongoing maintenance challenges due to flooding issues that are present on the site currently. We also looked at another option here. So this shifts the programming a little bit. It takes out some of the rec league fields that are existing, and then it focuses more on providing a easier to maintain, higher value baseball field, and then also provides open unprogrammed space that could be used for multi-use purposes, for events. I know Brentwood Days utilizes this site, so this option would still allow that. But the trade-off here is that a portion of the site would be dedicated to stormwater management to allow for some of these improvements to happen. And then the third option is kind of completely shifting the programming on the site. So turning it to more of a stormwater function, more ecological base, more passive use park space. This could include trails, boardwalks, educational features, similar to what we're proposing at the Wetland Arboretum. This could also include pavilions and nature playgrounds as well. With the Brentwood Wetland Arboretum, we've recently developed a master plan for that. So we didn't see a need to modify that master plan here, just to note that Phase 1 is under construction currently to transform the site, and then there's future phases planned as well that we'd like to maintain with this master plan. Brentwood Park recently developed out, but have some recommended improvements here as well. So one is on the eastern portion of the site, we saw the property owned by the city in Breckenridge Industrial Court as a potential location for skate park, BMX park, implementing more of a permanent stage setup on the park as well, near the pavilion, expanded parking, I know that's in progress, incorporating wayfinding signage, and also incorporating a veterans memorial on the park is another opportunity here. So with Broughton Park and Rogers Parkway, there was a plan developed in 2018 for that plan. It was an ambitious plan. So with this master plan, we're providing an option that works with the existing kind of road infrastructure, but still provides some of the same improvements that were proposed in that plan. So for example, in Broughton Park, this plan maintains Mary Avenue, but keeps the similar programming that was proposed with that feasibility study. So the open lawn space, the expanded open lawn, play lawn, renovated playground, and then incorporating a comfort station and a play lot. Something that's important with this one as well is, making sure that with keeping the existing configuration of the park and the roadways, that, as we're improving the park space, we're also making sure that we make safety improvements to the crossings with the trail along Rogers Parkway. Rogers Parkway itself, a portion of the trail near Manchester Road got rebuilt with the park development. We'd propose reworking the existing trail, improving the surface conditions, realigning where needed to avoid obstructions, then making sure that amenities are incorporated along that. So site furnishings, water fountains, other amenities to add comfort along the trail there. Also, along this, safety improvements at intersections will be key. But there's also an opportunity to incorporate stormwater capture areas in this Rogers Parkway section to kind of help mitigate downstream effects with stormwater coming from the neighborhoods and the streets. We'd also propose incorporating successional tree plantings along that stretch as the site gets improved. So Hanley Park, there's some newer areas here with the sand volleyball courts and the basketball courts being recently redeveloped. We have plans for the comfort station and pavilion to be renovated as well with additional parking. But a few other recommendations that we have here are incorporating potential pickleball courts. This could be incorporated as we have shown here with 2 standalone courts. Could also include modifications to the striping on the basketball court so it can function for basketball and pickleball as well. Other things we're recommending here is improvements to the dog park, so added amenities to the existing dog park, but also potentially expanding the dog park, with the thought being to expand it to allow for easier maintenance of the dog park. Yep.
Just on that last slide, just as I noticed some of the numbering is off on your diagram. So where currently you have 04 labeled, that should be 05 on the stream bank, and then 04 should be over by the expansion of the dog park. Confused me a little bit. At first I thought you were saying they expand the dog park along the creek there.
Nope, yeah,
I was
it's
like, whoa.
On the kind of I guess the southeast corner there. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to point that out while you're.
Oh, could I point out something else if we're pointing things out on the Broughton Park one? Item number 2 about design, implement playground renovation that talks about the church. So it seemed like maybe a cut and paste from the Mount Calvary one.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like, where's their church? And
I
I'm like,
was
oh,
curious
it's-
about that.
Yeah,
too.
I think it's maybe a cut and paste because I don't think there's a church in there. So.
Thank you. Yep.
And then as we get through these, I did have one question. Are you for these options, there are some areas that have options.
Yep.
Are we looking at trying to get agreement on what option we think should be in the plan, or is it customary to have a master plan that might have 1, 2, or 3 options available for a space so that it leaves it sort of open for development later?
I would say that that's something we're interested in as well. As we started talking about the master plan and as we started to see things develop, it kind of started with the sports complex. It's like, what do we do to control water there? And that's where the idea of the multiple options came up out of. Typically, you don't see a master plan with multiple options. Doesn't mean you can't have one. So I think that's really the kind of the question we have is, as we move forward, not that we have to make decisions tonight, but if we kind of forward it onto the board, say, hey, we'd really like, do we want to make a decision on a specific option? So the final thing will have just one option, or are we okay saying, hey, these are 3 great options. When it's time to start working on that park, let's focus on those 3 options and then really have that discussion at that time. So I think we can go either way. Jay, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the sports complex is a really good example because that's one that the additional option, so the 2 options that modify it will require additional study to really determine to what level, how that would happen. So in a plan like this, having a preferred option of those 3, but still keeping the other 2 in and saying, these were explored, this is the preferred direction, understanding that there'll be further study and design required so you still have that reference point for those
That makes
other ones
sense.
in there
All
as well.
right, great,
But yeah,
thank you.
I think getting feedback and having conversation about the ones that have options would be really helpful for us.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. So Memorial Park, we have several options here as well. All three of these options are really pretty similar. We're proposing similar elements here. So one being the parking lot, expanding that, renovating that parking lot. All three options propose removing the existing octagon structure located near the parking lot. And then all options include incorporating a newer, larger pavilion space, a new renovated playground, improvements to the woodland trails, improvements to the woodland itself, so invasive removal efforts. Also with this, noting the location and updates to the park would probably require stormwater management BMPs as well. There's also an opportunity with the existing lot on the east side of the park that's used for parking and storage currently. Should that become available, that could be converted to additional park space as well. With a realignment of that trail in that portion, that could potentially be another location for skate park, BMX type park as well. We're also looking at rink lighting, incorporating some lighting to increase the playability of the existing rink there. So with this option here, some of the differences are with the parking lot, aligning the entry point with the street across Strassner there, adding an additional pavilion along Strassner, then more direct bridge connection between the smaller pavilion on the west side of the park and the parking lot. With this one, same features. What we're kind of proposing on this one is a different configuration of the playground. So with this playground, it'd be more kind of nestled in the woods, more focused on nature play and that aspect. Oak Tree Park, we're proposing a light touch here. So the comfort station and pavilion is newer, same with the playground. Some of the main improvements that we're proposing here are on the south side of the park, creating a more accessible pathway from the upper portion of the park to the lower portion of the park, improving woodlands, invasive removal efforts, and then creating connections to Lewis Avenue as well. So those were the existing parks that we looked at. We also, I'm going to go through the undeveloped parks now. So Hanley Industrial Court was the first one we looked at. We have three options here as well. Same as the sports complex, different levels of intensity that we're proposing here. So the first one is more maintaining passive use space, providing a picnic area, could include a small shelter. This one doesn't have a connection to the trail that's across the creek on the west side of the park. This could also incorporate successional tree plantings, garden space. This one would be more focused on providing an amenity that users along Hanley Industrial Court could frequent. This second option provides a connection to the Leewood Trail across the creek there. This one is more focused on providing a outdoor fitness space within the park space. Would include a small pavilion shelter as well. This one also includes the trail and bridge connection across the creek, but this one is also focused more on potential area for skate track or a BMX pump track. Lewis Avenue, this park space, based on the feedback we heard, felt it would be preferred to kind of maintain it as open space, more unprogrammed, more of a focus as a trailhead, more or less for the nature trails that are leading into Oak Tree Park. So we would propose entry improvements there just to kind of highlight the entry to the park and the trail, signage, site furnishings, that sort of thing. And Mount Calvary Park, we have a plan here for incorporating a multi-use field on the west portion of the property that could be used for youth sports, whether that's soccer, softball, t-ball. We'd have a loop trail that circulates around the perimeter of the park. In the center of the park, aligned with the entry point, we would have a larger pavilion comfort station. On the eastern portion of the park, it's a little bit more wooded. We thought that would be a good place for a playground. Could be more nature-inspired, including pockets of play that are kind of nestled within the trees there. Then also along the edges, so along the western edge of the property, we know there's some stormwater challenges there, so we recommend correcting those. Also on the northeast corner of the park, using that as a stormwater capture area as well. And then surrounding the perimeter of what we're proposing here and the improvements, incorporating some vegetative buffers to kind of help buffer between the park space amenities and the neighboring residents. McKnight Park, really just kind of proposing maintaining as is, incorporating light amenities, so potentially bench seating. So kind of wrapping up with the parkland amenities, some of the other broader recommendations we're incorporating are, maintaining park, making sure that we're providing awareness of the amenities that are provided through park. Some of those were priorities identified through our engagement. So the indoor aquatics, fitness center, outdoor aquatics that are available through park. Sustainability, we know that's important. So some of our recommendations are aligning the proposed improvements with the sustainability plan that's approved by the city, incorporating tree plantings throughout the park system to improve the urban tree canopy. Where opportunities present itself, converting turf to native plantings, managing woodland. We noted that several times throughout several of the concepts. Then also, expanding sustainability, education, natural resource programming throughout the park system as well. The last one, this is already going on to some extent, but it felt it's important to kind of highlight and maintain this with this master plan as well, but just keeping that system-wide identity. So that's standardized park signage, site furnishings, integrating artwork throughout the park system. I feel that's important to incorporate as well. Jay to talk through.
Mind if I just jump in? Before we get into that, as it relates to Mount Calvary, and maybe Eric might be able to answer this. I know that the church does have amenities that they've recently put in, that there's some sort of on our property that, are those required to stay? Or did we take into consideration some of those adjacency programming that they have?
Yeah, I think the idea is the pavilion that's currently there, they basically said that they don't want access to it anymore. They don't need access to it, and they understand that we'd probably want to do something with a restroom if we're going to make it a park, a fully utilized park. And then as far as the playground or the pocket areas, they need something with a fence,
Right,
because it's a preschool. So that's kind of why they moved that small area over and fenced it. I think anything that we do just enhances what they already have.
okay. And then, I'm curious on if you all, because it's such a unique space and a decent amount of space, 4.5 acres or something like that, 4 acres. Could we consider an option 2 in the plan, just as here's just like we looked at for sports complex, and because I think this is a nice plan, but I'm curious if there were other ideas that could be considered for that space too.
Yeah, we could look, I think, knowing the program that we had discussed and had heard from an arrangement standpoint, there's a lot of existing condition out there that pieces sort of fell into place, but I think, the opportunity to explore we always like exploring ideas and other concepts. Is there as you look at it, is there something that kind of jumps out that you think would be worth exploring, or is it an organizational arrangement, or is there
Well,
something?
I just think it's an ambitious, design, which I think is great to have, but then, do we look at one that's maybe
Yeah.
a lighter touch
back
or
a
a,
bit.
so that's, I know the neighborhood there likes to have it as just sort of a space for their kids to go and roam, but you can speak to
So
it.
I was going to say, I love what you did at Mount Calvary Park. A lot of people wanted walking trails back there. You've got walking trails. I think people have historically used it as an open space, and you've
Right.
got open space, so it's available for rental. It's available for kids to just go and throw the football around. I like the playground that you designed there because it doesn't seem like that's the kind of play equipment that there is anywhere else in Brentwood. So we're not replicating Brentwood play equipment or the church play equipment, which historically they have always shared with us. The neighbors, I keep telling, like when people ask me what's going in, I'm like, something will be there, but it's not going to be houses.
Right, yeah.
So, I think it's just a really neat, interesting design that adds a lot of elements, and I don't think, it looks really expensive. The topography's
A challenge.
like,
Part
it's
of
a
it, yeah.
challenge. It's, I can't,
I do think
and there's
one of the
water
things-
issues there, but I think what you designed seems to take into account the land and the desires of the neighbors, and I think it's really brilliant.
Thank you, appreciate that. I think to your point, Alderman Gould, is one of the thoughts that we did talk about was, that pavilion and restroom being in the center of the park. And the idea there was to kind of organize everything around it. So we have the field that sort of uses it, we have the playground that uses it. We did, in conversation, maybe the idea of moving that further south and closer to the parking lot and leaving more open space out in the center. And we could still accomplish the same idea. There is some topography there between the field and up to where the restroom and the trees and the shelter, the restroom, trees. So that kind of worked as a separation, but you could still maintain that. We could maintain more open space in the center of the park by pulling that further south, which would be one.
Yeah, and I don't know that in this we need to get into that level of detail, because obviously these are concepts that if we were to then start to work on budgeting for this, I'm sure that would come out in an actual design
There'd be a whole
plan,
other design process.
whereas this is just more bubble charts of the activity that we'd like to activate within that. And I do agree with Alderwoman Tice. It seems to check all the boxes. I just, with some of the other examples where we had other options, whether we decide to keep those options in the master plan or not, I just was curious on if that ever came up for this.
Yes, it did internally, but we went with one. I think this kind of the Memorial Park would be sort of a parallel to options, because Memorial Park, it's really about taking the program and sort of organizing it and scaling it a little bit differently. So it's all the same elements. We just kind of, in one case, it's a larger, more centralized pavilion and play idea. And another one, it's maybe separating it out a little bit more. And I think that's kind of a direction we could go here, because it's all the same program. It's just thinking about how the relationships are and how they kind of relate to one another, but then also scale of some of those, something like that. So I do think we could put together, if you think it'd be helpful,
I don't know that it's necessary. I'm just asking whether or not that was considered. I think that, to your point, the elements would likely be similar. It's just scale and where you would position them on the property would depend on design studies and feasibility and all that,
And then the program becomes the driver for those next step of more
right.
detailed design and really budget management and kind of refining that a bit. So the program would be there, but we thought this one was a really solid sort of arrangement of what we heard and desires for the park. So.
Are we giving feedback on other designs
Yeah,
at this point?
go ahead.
Or do you
Yeah.
do you want that, Alderman? Okay,
Yeah.
so if I could jump to Brentwood Sports Complex.
Yes.
So option 3, it's no longer a sports complex. It's
No, it
just
is not.
another park.
It would be rebranded, yes, for sure.
And
It
so,
was,
we have a lot of parkland like that. And I just think, as difficult as the current park is with the flooding, at least there are fields that are used. And I don't know if option 2 is viable, like kind of raising that western edge up, but that would create a usable field. Those two options to me are far superior to option 3, which just gets rid of, like, there's no city-owned field. Like,
Right, yes, right.
that's other than that little thing in Mount Calvary, which is for T-ball and small soccer. So that one, that's the one that I was,
Yeah, the driver, and when we get to the operations, there's a note in there about some of this, but option 3 was really driven by sort of the cost recovery and investment side of this property. We take the name away, we'll just call it the property for now. And, the effort that's put into it and sort of there is a use to what's there now, the relationship with the school district and the high school and the use of those fields and, in Brentwood days, there's a lot that happens out here, but it happens at a pretty high cost, both in time and money, to maintain, especially after a flood event. I mean, outside the flood events, it's great, but flood events have major impact on this property. So this was a way, as we were talking through it, like Eric was mentioning, and as Scott was going through it, it was, okay, well, if we go from just keeping what we have, what would be the progression of options that we could go with? And 2 felt like a really good solution, but then it was, all right, if the idea is we find other opportunities for the field space and the event space that happens out here, do we just embrace the fact that this is part of, of the ecosystem of, Deer Creek, and how do we embrace that? And taking sort of guidance from what's happening at the Wetland Arboretum, does this sort of become a sister or a brother to that? And it's another example of how we can tie education, we can tie passive recreation into this space, and being so close to the neighborhood, to the north, it would be a really relaxing kind of passive space to come down and walk and kind of learn a bit about the ecology and the ecosystem, but still have elements like play and pavilions, rental spaces that it would be something a little different, unique. But this is a major shift change for sure, and comes with a lot of dominoes, as you mentioned as well, with regards to the fields and the other programming that happens with, Brentwood Days as well as anything else that might happen out there. So yes, this is an extreme. Usually extremes are like overdevelopment. This is an extreme.
It's an extreme, and I appreciate why you design. I mean, I do appreciate it because it's sort of fighting Mother Nature, the other 2 plants, but.
Yeah. Oh, and it's about getting the feedback, and it's about having this, that if, we talked about this early on, this is a 15, 20-year plan, that things change quite a bit over a small period of time, much less, a decade. So if opportunities came up in the course of time that some of those key drivers, that maybe 3 isn't the right fit now, but things happened over the next 5, 10 years that freed up this space from a bigger perspective of operations of a system and management of parkland, this could become a viable option down the road, but it's probably not the right option at this point in time, so.
And then the little Hanley Industrial Court
Yes,
one.
yeah, I want to talk about that one a bit.
So option 2 has fitness equipment stations.
It could either be.
So I'm just gonna just get it out there. So I've lived in Brentwood 26 years, and we live closer to Tillis Park, so I often walk in, and we didn't have a beautiful park, so now I walk in our park, but I used to walk a lot more in Tillis Park. And I could count on one hand the number of times I have seen people use that equipment. So I just I just want to throw it out now. I'll throw it out again if we get to a design phase, but that's one I'm like, people don't use that stuff when it's.
I would say if we talk about adult fitness, stuff like that, I would say that that's kind of more of the old school, kind of like the fitness trail you go along. There are a lot of newer kind of trendy things where it's really functional fitness equipment. It kind of started on the East Coast, go figure, because you're in Miami, you basically have a elliptical outside overlooking the water.
Yeah, which I've seen.
I think another good example is in Shaw Park, where they have basically in the middle of the park, they have basically, I think, 10 different pieces of fitness equipment. They also have areas where you can pull rubber band or pull bands to do functional fitness classes out there as well. And then, you know, there's the whole other extreme, which is something that we've kicked around our department a few times, would be kind of like the Ninja Warrior type courses that you see, whether it's in a park or you see kind of the Riverside Park in Memphis has kind of like those Ninja Warrior type fitness things that are a little bit more exciting than what you would have seen in Tillis.
And that, the bridge going over there I mean, it's all, you know, it's all great when you just think about it and you don't think about money, but the bridge going over there really does make it accessible to.
It makes a big difference, yeah, especially if it's gonna be an active space, like either this one or the third option with maybe the pump track skate park idea, but yeah, and you know, this was, like Eric was saying, it's not the typical balance beam
But yeah,
and pull-up
yeah.
bar. It could be, or it could be a combination of equipment and space that programming can be run at, and knowing that there are, you know, several fitness centers in the Hanley industrial area too, that, you know, there's some opportunity there for partnership and shared use of just an open space that they can use for
There
different
is lots of
events.
that.
So.
And then everything else is so small that I will.
And well, and this is such a, you know, it's a little postage stamp surrounded by asphalt and concrete and, you know, so thinking about a way to soften it, and it's, you know, right now it's turf, which is, you know, nice, but what can you do to make it a little more useful? And as Scott mentioned, you know, the day use that would happen by employees and people in Hanley Industrial could really activate this. And then the connection to the trail will be a big part of the, you know, the off-hour activation for sure, so.
I mean, there's another pedestrian bridge like 100 feet.
Just, right, yeah, well,
A
yeah, just up
multi-million-dollar
Yeah.
pedestrian bridge. So.
there's kind of the road bridge too, a little further to the east as well. So.
Yeah, but I think that park would be very popular for that exact reason, right? As Hanley Industrial transforms, you know, a place to walk and have a lunch would be, I think that would be wildly popular if you just threw a couple picnic tables out, actually.
Right, which was the intent, kind of this first one is that idea. It's add some shade, add some add some vegetation, soften it up, make it feel a little more like a room, but simple, just a pad with some picnic tables and an accessible route to it, so.
Well, if we're giving input, I would say, you know, the concept of putting a park in another town just seems like a really bad idea for us to do. We can't control it. We can't control it.
The potential of the skate park on.
Yeah, and Breckenridge
I would
Industrial.
agree with that.
I mean, that just seems like, honestly, a waste of time to even consider doing something outside of Brentwood.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of surprised that there isn't a soccer field in here. I know in Calvary there's a sport court kind of thing, which would be for little kids, but it seems like that was the feedback we heard a lot, that there was not enough soccer fields in the town. I don't see that anywhere.
Well, I think the intent of, and you can maybe answer this, but the intent of option 2 on Brentwood Sports Complex is that open field number 2 could be used as a soccer field,
Yeah,
correct?
that open green space becomes.
Or even a
multi-use.
softball,
Yeah, turf
a turf.
infield, you could put a backstop up, you could have movable goals. This is the largest area, and that's why the idea here was, you know, we were kind of stepping down and have these different elevations that allow for, you know, water at different levels. But yeah, that area too here in the center would be maintained as green space for just that, for either a field and also for Brentwood days, for sure.
I mean, maybe we just need to put like a dotted line of,
An outline of a field.
an outline of a soccer field so that people know, oh, yeah, this is we're not losing 2 softball fields and gaining a really nice baseball field, but not, you know,
Anything
like,
else to
we
offset,
really lose 1 softball field and could activate either somewhat of a softball or soccer on that.
Yeah, there's no reason that some of this, they couldn't be more defined field space down here. The idea is that it's being set up to be inundated more frequently than this upper area would be. And the other thing about soccer fields, I mean, green space is just at a minimum, any of the, you know, the park space that the city has. So yeah, trying to maximize what we could at Mount Calvary as a youth-size field. And then this here in Brentwood Sports Complex is an option, but there just isn't the level green space in the existing park, you know, park inventory to really think about having large field spaces. So we know there's a little bit going on with the school district that we've talked about, but just trying to provide that, in this case, with the space we have, just providing it as flexible as it can be for multi-use space, and then being able to, incorporate those different age groups as you can on those turf areas.
The other thing I'd say is when we talk about a soccer field, and even when we were at the old master plan, or even one of the first iterations of Northwest Park, when we turned it into Brentwood Park, it was always still half to 3/4 size field. We like to call it the 5th and 6th grade size. It was never 100 by 60, 120 by 70 yard field, because we never had that sort of space in Brentwood. So even the one that was going to go in Brentwood Park was a 3/4 size. So while we don't have a full-size field, even the one at Mount Calvary will still service. You're not going to be able to play older kid games, but you'll be able to have practices out there and things like that. And part of the understanding too is knowing that the school, the elementary school, is going to be supposedly building a couple turf fields on their campus as well.
Any other thoughts on park concepts? And the rest of this we'll move through pretty quickly. So trails and connectivity. Here we looked at it at different levels. Sort of the first was looking at the individual parks and the trails within the parks, and really just setting some expectations and criteria that become guidelines for redevelopment of existing parks and the potential for new parks. So, really prioritizing that each park has some type of a trail in it, whether it's large enough to have a loop, or it just has a linear trail that connects parking to shelters to amenities in an accessible way. So the 2.1 really focuses on that idea of integrating trails into parks, because we heard so strongly that connectivity and walkability is something that people value and they like to see continue to be a priority for the city. So thinking about that at an individual park level, and then also sort of establishing some baselines for trail width. So whether they're sidewalks or loop trails, or intended to be more of a multi-use trail, which we're getting more of with the Rogers Parkway and into Brentwood Park, and having those opportunities there. So kind of just setting some guidelines. Obviously, all situations are unique, and if you can't hit an 8-foot or a 5-foot, but you can do 4 and 6, those, that's where you go. But the expectation going in is, okay, we know we want to strive for this and see what we can accomplish. Then the last item there is about, thinking about those opportunities where you don't want to do paved trails, but you want to make sure you have access. So whether it's at a memorial park in the woodland, and maybe it doesn't want to be paved, but it's a natural surface of some kind, or a composite surface, or mowing through an area of native to have a walking path that gets people out to a spot. It doesn't all have to be paved, but we want to prioritize paved and accessibility. And accessibility was another one out there as well. So starting at the park level, and then kind of stepping out to sort of the citywide, the region, the connection, the citywide idea. And really what we did here for this sort of the second piece, the 2.2, the recommendation section that thinks about citywide connections, is mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of planning and conversation about connectivity and trails over the years. So we went back and we looked all the way back to the bike ped plan that was done. We looked at the comprehensive plan. We looked at the 2016 park master plan. And we kind of said, okay, what was in all of these, and what are we hearing now that continues to come forward? And what we really came down to is that there is planning in place already for a real solid backbone, sort of skeleton structure of connectivity through the city, and a lot of that's already in place. That's on the next page. I'll go there in a second. Just really quick, the other, sort of the last piece to this section was about what do you do within the trail system to support, promote education, let people know where they're at. So the idea of trailheads and signage and integrating those into the system become big parts of kind of building it out, and really letting people be comfortable kind of moving through a system if they're not familiar with it for the first time, or having the ability to come somewhere, park, and then be able to experience the trail system. So, so from a trails and connectivity standpoint, what I mentioned, we just sort of consolidated what's been done and highlighted what really felt like a real structure to connectivity. And what we found is there's sort of 3 alignments east and west through the city, and sort of 3 alignments north and south through the city. And they kind of go north, central, south from the east and west connections, and from the north to south, they go east, central, west. So what we highlighted in that case, so from the north to south, so the east to west alignments going north to south, the comprehensive plan talks about the Brentwood Trail, which really starts at like McKnight in 64 and works its way through Brentwood Forest and comes out to Strassner, crosses Strassner, goes along Strassner, kind of into really connecting up to the metro stop, at the Brentwood metro stop. So that's kind of the northernmost east-west connector proposed. The central one has been developed out, along Litzinger, but we also talk about White Avenue being an alternate to that. Obviously, Litzinger has the improvements in place with the sidewalks, the connectivity. White Avenue was pretty popular because of its connectivity to the high school, and it really being the route that a lot of kids take to get over to the schools when they come over. But Litzinger has the infrastructure already in place, crossing Brentwood, and then being able to continue to the east, along either Rosalie or Eulalie, and kind of continuing on to the east. And then on the south end, it goes all the way down to Russell. And now we have, with the improvements being put in to cross Brentwood to Brentwood Park, we really now have this strong south, east-west alignment that takes you all the way from, Brentwood, from the sports complex all the way over through Brentwood Park and even to the metro stop, at the south end if you wanted, or potentially crossing up and being able to connect in, to Oak Tree Park and the Lee Wind Trail and linking up to that end. But we now have that really solid south connector piece that's going in. So those are kind of the east-west alignments. And then the north-south alignment starting from the west is, High School Drive, which is probably the most challenging of them, but the alignment is in place or has been identified. There have been the, pedestrian crossings of Manchester been put in just to the east of High School Drive now, and then there's the alignment then that brings you down to Russell and connect in. So we have that for the westernmost connection. Then we look at Rogers Parkway, which is the obvious sort of central spine there from north to south. And then at the east end, we have the Lee Wind Trail, the Dogwood Trail connecting into Oak Tree Park, and all those tie into each other at different points as well. We've also, in this plan, we also highlight, those are more pedestrian sort of community trail connections, but we still have Manchester and Brentwood that become pretty solid east-west, north-south sort of alternative or multimodal transportation routes because of the improvements that are happening along Manchester, and they could happen along Brentwood over time as well. So we identify those two as more of the infrastructure side of it, whereas those other trail connections become the community connection pieces of it. So we didn't want all the work that had been done to just be thrown out and we kind of start over and throw a bunch of ideas out. We really felt that was kind of taking the time to look through what's been done and bring that all back to the forefront, really created a really solid trail system within the city. And a lot of it's already in place. Some of it might just be connecting in or continuing to improve as it goes. So, so that's the focus of the Trails and Connectivity section. Programming and events kind of blends over a lot of the park stuff that we were talking about, the recommendations we were talking about. There is a desire for expanded programming, and a lot of it focusing on the fitness and sort of community side of things. We'll talk about the community center here in a second, but that goes hand in hand with the community center and the facility side of it. But really focusing on and looking for expanded programming. We have some recommendations that tie to that. Scott mentioned, the cooperative agreement, and really re-emphasizing that and making people aware of the benefit that's there, and being able to build upon that and let people know that they have those opportunities, just need to take advantage of them. We talked about events already as well and how important those are, prioritizing those and continue to think about what can happen with the growth and the evolution of the park system in a Brentwood Park, in a Mount Calvary, in some of these other areas of the city to expand those events and programming opportunities. And then we've talked quite a bit about the sports complex already, but there's a programming impact to that as well, and thinking about where that goes, and an event impact with Brentwood Days. And so I mentioned a lot of that ties to the facility. So we did have Reed Voorhees, the architect on our team, really spent some time looking at the community center and what those opportunities could look like.
Give a quick overview here. So a lot of the outdoor park facilities, that 4.2 recommendation, really those are kind of built into the park-specific plans that we already kind of reviewed. But we also did quite a bit of study of the community center specifically, looking at potential opportunities to expand the footprint of the building. You kind of see in the diagram to the right there some of those areas highlighted in blue to kind of help potentially add additional space for programming, expanding the meeting rooms that are existing in the building, storage space, operational and admin space, and other support space to help support the ice rink facility as well. So several concepts were developed, looked at different configurations for how the existing community center could be expanded, renovated from within, all the way from design concept A, which is a fairly minimal renovation, all the way to D, which incorporates expansions of the footprint of the building, but also expanding up as well as out. So you can kind of see there's several different configurations, each with different aspects of areas of the building that we're trying to renovate and incorporate, and focusing on different kind of programming and support needs throughout. The other focus area of recommendations for operations. So one of the things that we heard from our engagement was that a lot of residents are very satisfied with the level of maintenance that's provided within the park system currently. I think that's a pretty big win. The focus of the previous master plan, one of the key focuses there was improving maintenance throughout the park system. So that shows that was acted on, that's maintained. But also it's important to recognize that, with the expanded programming we're talking about here, the newer park spaces that we're looking at developing, being able to make sure that we maintain that high level of care. Storage facilities, that was an important thing that was identified throughout the process. So making sure that we have facilities and storage space for equipment, materials, other things that help support that maintenance, operations, and programming. Staffing is another important recommendation here. Know that seasonal part-time staffing is a challenge. That's pretty common. So looking at other areas or ways that we can help improve that, whether that's converting a couple of those positions to full-time positions, evaluating opportunities to contract out services should be explored as well. The other thing to recognize is importance of maintaining key revenue streams. So the ice rink, outside of sales taxes, debt proceeds, and transfers in, that's a big part of the Parks and Recreation budget. So it's important that we maintain the programming, special events that help support that revenue to help support the park system. So next steps, I know Jay already kind of talked through this a little bit. I'll just kind of recap, then we can close this out. So our next steps over the next few weeks, we're going to be working through our capital action plan, identifying priorities, costs for some of the improvements, then just kind of wrapping everything up, finalizing the master plan. Then we'll be back in July with a presentation of the final master plan to the Board of Aldermen. So with that, I think we can open up to any questions that you all have, and we can go back and look through different plans as well.
Comments?
I love all the thought that's gone into a lot of this, so thank you very much. And it does seem like you've really done a good job of listening to staff needs, listening to residents' needs, hearing some of our feedback, and incorporating a lot of that along the way. So I appreciate that tremendously. On the facilities recommendations, I'm curious, and this may just not be an alignment yet because it's an unknown, but when the library does build their new building and they move out, we're going to have space, 7,000 square feet space in City Hall here. I didn't know if that was thought through for a longer-term plan is how that might impact the needs over at the rec center as it relates to whether that's additional space for rental or administration needs that might.
Yeah, we did have a brief conversation about it, but I think it was a little too early.
Right.
The move was a little bit too late in our plan, and I think there still needs to be a lot of investigation over whether or not, what we could use for it, and more importantly, if there's any other needs within the city. I will say that I'm not the only one who wants that space downstairs. It's a prized property right now, so that is one thing that.
We're gonna have a cage fight over it? Okay, I got it, understood. You know, and as far as the sports complex, if we were to identify a preference one, mine would be option 2. I think that it's it shows that there's an ability to maybe do some meaningful improvements that could impact more than just providing better fields for play, but maybe even mitigating some of the flooding problems there. So I think that's a good balance while not losing completely. So that would be, you know, my feedback on that. I
concur.
Okay, sorry. I love the ideas of the facilities. There's just a lot of dead space there, awkward space. I think having 2 entrances is confusion for users. It's, you know, so as a long-term plan, I would love to see that option C, design concept C, as sort of a visionary. I think it would add amenities for fitness areas. It would increase the size of rental space. You know, and if we're going to do it, putting it on a second level seems to be, again, we could have options in there, but if we're going to have a master plan that's visionary, to me, I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, when we were doing the last master plan, we just come off about a 10-year discussion about what to do with that building, so it wasn't really part of the last master plan, so it's kind of nice to get fresh eyes on it and see what we could do, so.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean, option D seems like the biggest difference is that moving administration building or offices up to the second floor from operations, that your team would have to answer whether or not that would be a good thing, you know, having to come up and down steps all the time.
It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
You know.
We can handle it.
So it seems like C and D seems to be the biggest difference.
You can handle it until you have to compensate for someone with disability.
Well, I mean, we
There-
wouldn't have to worry about an elevator.
There'd be an elevator for sure, but even just being able to operationally maintain the rooms and stuff, you know, maybe being on the same floor as those seems like it would make more logical sense to me, but anyway, good options to consider.
The only thing I would throw in is, and I have to because I'm the dog park guy, but is, you know, there's huge demand for a 0 entry kind of water feature in the dog park. So I don't know if that, when you say water source, that's what that means, but just that thought of in the plan at some point too. So is there actually action from the committee here tonight? Because it's not a vote to proceed.
No,
'Cause it's
until
not-
it
until we
gets to
get
the
to the
board. So
priorities and
maybe a
everything.
motion to, you know, forward it to the board.
Make a motion that we forward the Parks Master Plan to the board and have it presented in July.
But that would be after the priorities and the capital plan is all set, right? So we're, okay,
With additional information added.
okay. All right, any other comments, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, great, great work, SWT.
So real quick, I know this went really long, but 2 quick things for me. I want to personally thank SWT because one of the things that was a big focus for me and my staff was making sure we got a lot of input, a lot of feedback and things like that. And the last master plan, we had a lot of good public meetings, but it was the same 30 people. And I think just the amount of input we got here, while we were disappointed at some of those public meetings, all the stuff that was done online, digitally, a lot of ways that they came through with trying to figure out different ways to communicate with people. And I think they did a really nice job doing that and then listening to it. And then secondly, and again, this is one that I probably don't do enough of, which is celebrating my staff, is one of the things that I'm proud of is the fact that last time, as I said, we got hit on our park system and the way it was maintained, and we really made it a focus to make sure that it was better maintained and take a negative to a positive. And I think if you, Marty and his staff and even Peter Vorham really took that challenge and said, by the next time we have a master plan, we won't have those comments. And I think they've done a wonderful job with that. So, thank you.
Eric? Okay, we'll move in the department reports. So, Public Works. Rolling right along at the beginning.
These are fairly short. So Russell, Missouri American completed their work. That just leaves the railroad equipment to show up probably in the next week or two. The main takeaway, though, is the TWM answered one of the RFIs, request for information. That's pertaining to 8829 Russell. So if you recall, the 3-to-1 slope that we tried to get on that north side of Russell, we could get most of the way, but not by the driveway. So if you look at the attachment, there's a curb wall that's proposed, and that curb wall comes up about 6 inches above grade, and then the rest of it's buried below grade. So if you built that curb wall, if you look at the design, you're able to come up 3-to-1 from the back of that curb. The curb would be adjacent to the sidewalk, and it would extend on that north edge of Russell, the south side of the property. I haven't presented it to the property owner yet. I wanted to get the opinion of the committee before we would go any further. If we did go with that option and they approved it, then we would make them sign a release. That way we're done with it. But that would get to the 3-to-1 that was originally part of the design. I don't know if you have any questions on that. Or
Obviously, I think you're looking at me on this one. I mean, I think that this is a reasonable way to approach it and satisfies the, being able to actually achieve the 3-to-1 that we had in there. So, I mean, my recommendation would be to have a conversation with the homeowner and make sure that this is going to be acceptable. And then I don't know if do we need the city attorney involved with some sort of a contract that says we're done?
I would imagine so. We've done it in the past. Yes, we would automatically do that.
Okay. And the one thing we're waiting on is Gersonson's going to give us a price for constructing it, so we won't know what the cost is. I know that Navigate's reached out to them. They'll submit a cost proposal. So this was, again, going back to the engineer, it's like, hey, we came close, but we didn't quite reach the 3-to-1. So this gets us to that point and hopefully puts that in the rearview mirror.
And is this a similar design to the commercial property that's just east of this property?
Yeah.
And I think, so it would just be consistent with what was done on that side. So, I mean, I'm supportive of this.
Okay, we'll take that.
I don't know if you don't need an emotion or anything.
No, we'll just go visit the property owner. The street sweeper, we were able to use Maplewood sweeper again, so we used it during this week. We were going to do Brentwood 4 streets tomorrow, but we actually got them done today with the streets that we listed today, as well as like Wrenwood, Swan Circle, High School. So we're going to return it tomorrow. We'll pick it back up during that week of the 24th, so we can do Hanley Industrial, Strassner. We weren't able to do the commercial district, but we will. We did receive FEMA approval to buy a new sweeper, so we put together the CRA. We got approval on that. We placed an order. It'll be here in a few months, brand new build sweeper. So hopefully we can continue to use a new one for 10 or more years. MSD OMCI tax, I just need to write a draft letter, give it to BOLA, but from the previous meetings, we would want to support 25% of the OMCI. We just need to submit that before the end of the year, or actually probably about November, since the board meets then. 6 Yorkshire Lane Court, it's under Whitney's report, so I'll just skip over that. The temporary parking lots, the gravel lots for the park, those seem to be working okay. I haven't really noticed anything like eroding. We did put, you know, timbers around to kind of hold the rock. The straw wattles that were installed on that north one, it seems like there's water that seeps underneath there, so we did look at, you know, could you do a berm, could you do a swale? Speaking with Castle, they said, you know, the only way you would be able to do something like that was if you actually had design drawings and submitted to MSD for a permit. So that would involve, you know, picking up topo, you know, data points, elevations, doing a full-scale layout of what you're planning on doing with slopes and submitting that to MSD. You know, we asked them for a cost proposal of what, since they have their own engineers that could do it, sign it, seal it, and send it to MSD, what would that be? We don't have that yet, but when we do, we can bring that to the committee and see if you're interested in that. Brentwood Forest Condominium Association had an interesting meeting yesterday wherein they would like, CPM is the management team that does the operations now for Brentwood Forest. They're wanting to change the way trash is collected. So for those of you that don't live there, trash is collected Mondays and Thursdays, recycling's on Mondays only. So the way we do it is, you know, 2 trucks do trash, 1 truck does recycling. Whoever gets done first, you empty your contents, help the others till you're done. So that's the way it's been working for us. So, you know, there's 1,425 units. The way they want to change it is to do concierge service where you don't leave it at the curb, you leave it at your doorstep. So the team their team would pick up door to door, but they can't do all 1,425 units, so they're going to break it into 5 different sub-districts. So these group of buildings over here, say it's 285 of them, they'll receive it on Monday, and then say Wednesday or Thursday, and so on and so forth. Everyone will get a primary and a secondary day just like you do now, but it'll be at your doorstep. That's going to cost them more money, so then they're looking at us if we would want to cost share somehow. I don't know what that is. They didn't give an exact number. The other thing is that they would put in a compactor on Swallow near Swan Circle. So instead of picking up trash like we do and putting it in the back of a truck and compacting it that way, this is a compactor that would be mounted to a concrete pad, and then they take it in smaller trucks, put it in there and compress it, and it drops it into a dumpster. And then recycling could be put into dumpsters that are within that same little confine. It's something that they have to talk about as a board. It's just wanted to make you aware of it. I don't want to get into the weeds, but didn't know if you'd heard anything about it.
So, it sounds like they still have some work to do
They do.
before they have to figure out what they're doing. I'll just say that it's unusual that the city picks up a condo association's trash to begin with.
Right.
So, I'm not interested in a fee reduction for a quarter of our city and not for the rest of it. So if everybody else pays for concierge service, I mean, everybody in the city pays for concierge service, and everybody in the city should be paying for concierge service. So that's my 2 cents on that.
If I can clarify, what they're proposing is that their staff would be doing the concierge service.
Right.
Not
Right, but
Brentwood employees.
what reduction in cost are they
That would
talking?
be that's my confusion, because there's no fee
There's
we're
no
charging
fee,
them.
yeah.
So we
Right.
would be
They're
paying
saying
them.
because you're reducing your labor, you're reducing your fuel, you're reducing your disposal because you're not going to and from the dump every single day because it's being held in the compactor.
But-
And a roll-off company's taking the dumpster full of stuff.
So then what's the city's role? Like,
They're trying to negotiate
Right.
where there
they
should
want
be
us to
none.
pay them? I mean, like,
To help contribute, like whatever
No.
we're saving, you would pass along
No.
some of your savings.
Because
to-
there would be greater implication for our sanitation department
Right,
because we
yeah.
would have to reduce staff.
Right.
Because we would not need them anymore.
You wouldn't need as many because you wouldn't
don't
be
have-
picking up the trash. It would be picked up by someone else.
Okay.
I would only be picking up recycling on Mondays because we don't do trash on Mondays except in Brentwood Forest.
How well-baked do you think is this pie? I mean, like, is this probably something we're never going to talk about again?
Probably. I mean, you've been on the board quite a while, and there's been a
Yeah.
lot of debate about even, kind of like what Alderwoman Tice said, providing this service to Brentwood Forest to begin with. And I think maybe part of the reason why we continue to do it is because the all the persons from Ward 4 were very strong advocates to continue to provide the service. So if the Brentwood Forest Management are looking to improve their services, which is a good thing, they're not paying anything for it now, so I'm not sure why they would be beneficiary of a cost reduction for the city.
Okay.
Or expect a cost share.
Yeah.
Where the city would contribute to, just,
And it would also be a shift in how people do it now, because right now you can put it out the night before. If this is concierge, you're only supposed to put it out like the morning of, like, put it out like sometime before 9 a.m. because they don't want animals just tearing the bags apart. You would have to put recycling in one bag and trash in another. And then they rip open a recycling bag, see if it is recyclable. If it isn't, it's trash. If it's recyclable, it goes in a dumpster. So it's a lot of handling,
That sounds, if they want to do that, that sounds great.
and it would raise their assessment.
Awareness only and
Yeah.
wait for something
we'll wait for
actually
more
to show up.
information.
Yeah, I believe that they're meeting next week, Wednesday, so there should be some additional facts from that meeting. And what else? Oh, McKnight Road, put that on there. We sent the contract to Gershenson. They're going to return it to us. The main takeaway on that one is that Rock Hill reached back out to us and said that they don't want to participate and do their southeast corner. So the way we approved it is fine. You know, we do the northeast corner of the tires, and we do from Litzinger going north all the way up to York. So everything is good on that, and that's it.
Okay, any questions for Dan? All right, thanks,
Cool.
Dan.
Thanks.
Eric, you're up. I'm going to take a quick bio break, but keep talking. Be right back.
So go?
go ahead, he said,
Okay.
keep talking.
Keep talking.
So why don't I go stuff that doesn't need you guys to approve anything. So the first is the accessible parking. Terry Johnson, the ADA Inclusion Coordinator, talked about, since we're doing the temporary parking, that really we should probably add one more handicap space, accessible parking space. And obviously that would have to be in the parking lot next to the park. So I kind of put the picture of the one we recommended because it's right next to a van accessible space. So we just take that one and turn it into an accessible space. So that's something that we'll be working on here in the next few weeks. And then she also talked about the fact that if we do permanent parking, again, we'd have to really make sure, we'd have to follow code, which is what we would do anyway, which is really one accessible space for 25 spots. So right now we're at 66, that's why we have 3. If we got above 75, we need a 4th. If we got over 100, we need a 5th. So the 5th one would have to go to the right. When you see that last space on the right, you'd have to take that next space next to that, turn that into a van accessible space, and then the one to the right of that even then would be accessible. So you'd lose one space to get initial accessible space. So that's kind of where we're at right there. Backtracking then, so we got some options from Jacobs Engineering, some concepts of what we could do with that permanent parking space or permanent parking lot, and they really just need a direction. And so we talked about a couple things here and even at the board level. And so the concepts or concept A, which was trying to save the landscaping, and it can be done, but you really lose about 10 parking spaces. And if we're really doing a parking lot, do we want to maximize it as much as possible? B, adds additional extensions on the side to help with cars turnaround, because that was one concern, which was probably a very good concern about how cars are coming and utilizing that space, because it's not very, it'd be a challenge if you just let people go in and out. So then we add those on the end. Concept C goes to angled spaces, which was asked for at the board meeting. But when we look at concept C and D, the real thought from Jacobs is we do one entry in, one entry out, so it'd be one way. That's what they do at Veterans Tribute Park, and it works out really well. And so if you do that, then concept D, you don't have to worry about angled. You could do straight in parking, and you'd be able to get around 36. Again, these are all just concepts. They'd have to really put the pen to the pencil, pen to the paper, and really start moving on this. So really what we're looking for is a recommendation. Staff, our thought is, while we hate to lose the landscaping, if we're gonna do it, we should try to maximize the space. And so our recommendation would be concept D.
Yeah, Nancy?
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is a really expensive parking lot. So if we did option A, not counting Jacob's design fee, it's just the estimated $350,000. We're looking at $14,000 a parking spot. I mean, we could like levitate people in or something that would be cheaper than that. So I definitely think we just need if we think we need the parking, let's do concept D.
All right, so that's what we'll do. We'll move forward and we'll start working on that design. So I was contacted by Brentwood Middle School. They want to do a fun run. They were looking for a way to raise money for their PTO, for their excursions that they do in the middle school. And they really want to go back to the time where we had a run at Brentwood Days. And so we had a long conversation, and what they really want to do is try to minimize city resources. They know we're maxed out for Brentwood Days, so they're trying to figure out what they could do to make sure that it doesn't interfere with anything that staff has to do. We'll obviously have some sort of, we'll have to help out in some way, so there'll be some sort of staff assistance, but they're talking about staying away from the parade and trying to either use Brentwood Park or just start at Memorial Park and use the trail system and try to stay out of the way. That was our conversations. Look, if we can stay on the trails, don't go on any roads, you don't have to worry about public works, you don't have to worry about police. We're really looking at Parks and Rec and maybe fire assistance if we're worried about any sort of injuries or things like that. And so they were open to that. So basically what we're looking for is see if the committee is interested in having staff work with them on this middle school run. They also are requesting to host a packet pickup. They're thinking about maybe Brentwood Days. might try to push them to the community center, because if you're only coming in for a packet, trying to find a place to park for Brentwood Days, get down in the park and then out would be probably a challenge, where we could give them a free room in the community center. It'd be probably just as easy. So.
If I don't have anyone at the middle school, I will say I think this is a great idea, and I would love for the staff to work with the middle school parents on this.
The middle schooler, I agree. I think it's a great way to get the community going, especially if it's packet pickup at the rec center. Then maybe they can also be encouraged to pick up a wristband for unlimited rides as well at the same time. So
there you go. So we'll start working with them, and what I asked is that maybe they loop in the Parks and Rec department in their committee meetings, and I think they're open to that. So that way we keep conversation going.
Like a good use of the new trails and the tunnel and
definitely
all of that.
So, yeah. So next is Lee Wind repair. We started that project. So we kind of just listed what we've done in the past month with Castle, and so they're kind of working on the first thing. And really the big question is how much work they're going to need to do in the creek, which then would trigger different permits. Whether it's with DNR or those type of things. They're trying not to have to do that and try to stay out of the creek. And so one of the things that they talked about is really needing to be able to access from that little gravel area in the Little Bit Foundation. So we did talk to Hilliker. My thought is we've always identified that place as a possible extension of Hanley Park for the dog park. Hilliker doesn't seem very, they don't think that whoever a little bit will want to give away that portion if they're trying to sell the whole property. But maybe they'll give a small 10-foot sliver where we could divert the trail a little bit more north to then work on that slope a little bit more on that trail. So Hilliker is going to reach out to them and talk to them about a couple things, but that's where we're at with Castle.
Hey, Eric, I mean, is it possible that we're just going to spend a lot of money to try and repair this trail that's going to fall in again later, and maybe we need to expand our thinking, right? We have this other parcel that maybe makes sense to put a bridge, and maybe we just need to reroute the trail out to the road and over and just be done with this, having it right next to the bank.
I would say that is a concept. The difference is that FEMA wouldn't pay for that. FEMA is paying for these repairs. So that's the main difference, is that FEMA gave us $1.4 million for all of the Lee Wind Trail. If we try to do anything outside the scope of what was damaged, we'd have to give that money back. So 2831 Hilldale, I know that's been a conversation for a little bit, and we kind of really wanted to make sure, especially after what happened with some of those other pathways, that we're doing the right thing. So Bob Jones from Curtis Hines, Garrett O'Keefe, is making sure he's got the process down. He actually spoke with the lead analyst for St. Louis County's assessor's office. and confirm that the property was acquired by a trustee's deed, so that the city should determine what the the abutting property owners want to do, and then we can do a quick claim deed, which is basically a lot easier than a vacation. So we're digging into that right now, but we're trying to move forward with that as quickly as we can.
So when you say the abutting property owners, does that mean that we need to, even though the property owner that has done the due diligence to even get to the place of knowing that there's a trustee's deed and everything, you know, do we need to then try to say to the other property owner?
No, I think because we own the property instead of it being right away, that gives us a little bit more latitude.
Okay.
But again, Bob wants to make sure to dot every I and cross every T
Sure.
before we move forward.
Okay, all right,
So,
great. And has there been any communication with the property owner that's
not on my
initiated
end,
this?
but I can reach out to him tomorrow or early next week.
Okay.
'Cause I think I have.
It's a good, it's good progress that we've made, and it seems to be going in the direction that it needs to go.
I can definitely do that. So then the Brentwood bound site camera. So we've been talking a little bit internally in staff. We have 4 site cameras that are on the city's website. Well, the project's really done at this point, and we're not sure if there's a benefit to having that on the website anymore. So our recommendation is take it off the website, put 2 in the 2 temporary parking lots, so that way we have sort of eyes on those parking lots if anything were to happen. I would like to put one in the sports complex to see how water comes into the park and things like that, because we've never been able to say for certain that that's where water's coming from, especially now that Brentwood Bound's been done. And then we'd still like to leave one to kind of overlook phase 1 and phase 2, because it is kind of interesting to see how that water runs through there. So we have we own the cameras. The cost that we have is to live stream it. So the city would still have access to live stream it internally. Can obviously give that access to the aldermen as well. And then the conversation going into 25 is, do we need the live streaming service? Can we do anything like our regular camera system, which is record and then review after the fact? So we'll look into those things. But if you're okay with what we'd like to do with the other 3 cameras, we'll get those moved. Great. And the last is real quick. This came up just the other day, and we're talking about staff in a staff meeting. And so the police department continues to say I have a little bit of problems with people in Brentwood Park after the park closes. One of the recommendations is maybe putting a gate on the parking lot. Now, again, there's tons of access in the park, but it is something that's done in many parks throughout St. Louis and the country. So we'd be happy to look into that if that's something that the committee wants us to do. It'd be the police department would have to come lock it up, because that'd be late after we're all gone, and then they'd have to open up in the morning before our staff got in, and Major Simpson said they'd be happy to do that.
If they think that would make it safer and better for them, I think we should do it.
Great.
Yeah,
That's
they'd
it?
have to have it open pretty early in the morning. 'Cause
Oh,
it's
yeah,
probably
people.
very early people.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. All right, planning and development.
Good evening. The May reports for building division are included in your packet. For the month of May, there was 234 new building permits and 871 inspections. Code enforcement had 50 new cases started in May with 107 inspections. The pathway connection to 6 Yorkshire Lane as in West One Circle, the property owner has decided not to pursue providing a pathway, and he has put the house on the market. The neighbors have indicated they prefer not to have a pathway, so we are not pursuing that design any further.
Just for context, so from what I understand from the trustees, the owner plans to deed this land to the neighborhood associate, to the neighbors, to the neighborhood, like the little pathway that they have going into York. And they will assess everyone to help repair the retaining wall, and they plan to build a fence so that there is a complete barrier between their neighborhood and Brentwood Forest.
I have, yeah. Because he had asked if they didn't have to do the fence, he would be fine with that. He wanted to know what we did, so I've been trying to track down the original subdivision plans. I've found some notes within the files that a fence was required, but I haven't seen the original plans, whether that was actually shown on the drawing, so I'm still trying to track that down. If it was required as part of the subdivision, I don't believe that would then require going to P&Z, but it may still require going to P&Z, so.
Thank you.
So last night was the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We had 6 items on the agenda. The continuation of this comprehensive sign plan for 1234 Hanley Industrial Court received approval, and so that will be on Monday's agenda for a public hearing. The parking lot and facade improvements at 8031 Litzinger Road for Carboline was continued. They have a pending variance request at the June 27th Board of Adjustment meeting. So we were so they'll go back on the July 10th meeting following that decision. The conditional use permit for the watering bowl was also recommended approval, so that will be on the July 15th Board of Aldermen meeting, as well as Activate Games at 8324 Eager Road. That's in the former Lazy Boy space. That will also be on July 15th. And then we had 2 comprehensive sign plans for 2828 South Brentwood Boulevard and 8121 Manchester Road, and those also both received approval. So next week is the Architectural Review Board. We have 2 items on the agenda: a new residence at 8818 West Pendleton and a room addition at 9344 White Avenue. And then the following week is our Board of Adjustment. We have a variance request for a deck within the front yard setback at 9020 Pine, a fence variance at 2609 Mary Avenue, and the Carboline structure in front of the building. That's all I have.
All right, any questions for Whitney?
I mean, I may attend the Board of Adjustment, but the Mary Avenue fence variance, that's kind of an odd one, because it's not technically their front yard, but it's their back edge
Their rear-
backyard.
right.
But it is being questioned because it's
Within the front
a
yard.
front facing of that very tiny corner of a,
Right.
of, what was that, Kentland Circle? or-
Litzinger, I think.
No,
No.
it's it's one of those little short streets that just connects, I'm blanking on it now, but.
Yeah, so it's actually within the front yard setback of the house that it backs up to, which is, because the curve of the road, the front yard setback, it would be within that area. So it's rather odd for that one.
Okay. And was that discussed at the P and Z? Is that why it's going to?
No, that's just
The Board of Adjustments, it was denied from your department, so it had to go to the.
yeah, we
Board of
said we
Adjustment.
had to go to it had to go to the Board
Okay.
of
All right.
Adjustment.
Great.
Yeah, it
Thank you.
didn't. Yeah, it didn't go to P&Z.
All right, great.
Questions? All right, thanks, Whitney. Item D, SUSCOM, I don't think we have anything tonight. Moving to the consent agenda, we have the meeting minutes from May 9th.
Approval.
Second?
Any comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Great. Old business, Soul Smart.
So we talked a little bit about Soul Smart in the past, but the Sustainability Commission has formally made a recommendation to move forward with the Soul Smart program and asked that the city join Soul Smart and work toward a gold designation. Dana?
Having technical issues over here.
Technical issues with board docs, and I was like, where is everything?
A little punchy already, and we got a lot to go.
So yeah, I mean, the basic is that the Sustainability Commission made the recommendation to move forward with having the city join Soul Smart and work toward a gold designation. Go through a little bit more, but trying to respect time, so.
You know, I am completely in favor of this, and from a point of standardizing. I know, Jeff, you had a feedback at a ward meeting of like, it's inconsistent and it's hard, and like, not hard, but what this is all about is a consistency, right? Is there weirdness in our permitting, and we want to make sure that, you know, it's very easy to put solar panels on and it's consistent. Ultimately, I'd like to get to the Solar App Plus where, it, you know, it streamlines the permitting process, because it's the same whether you're in Brentwood or Richmond Heights or anywhere else. So I'm completely in favor of doing this.
Yeah, I just have one question. I see, it seems like I'm in favor of it. There was some training in there, it looked like, for staff. Is that training that already happens with our planning and development and
That
fire
I'm
departments?
I don't know for sure, but I know this training specifically was with Soul Smart staff.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think they've done any of that training yet. So no, so this would be some additional training to kind of make sure that and I'd probably join that as well, because I'll help make sure that program moves
Yeah.
forward.
Well, if it makes things more streamlined for residents, I think seems like a great thing.
Great.
I mean, I totally agree with the rationale for doing it, but it says no fiscal impact. Is there no fiscal impact to being a participant of this program at all?
No.
Or there'll be some potential costs in the additional training that needed, and
I mean, the training is free. The real cost is primarily staff time to set up everything. And ultimately, if there's things that the city chooses to do about rebates or things like that. But as the thing is set up, there's multiple ways to get to your designation. There's specific requirements. None of those requirements have any sort of fiscal responsibility, and then you can always do some other things. I mean, if we got I looked at it, if you got to this, the bronze is, all you need is the 20, which are things that you have to do. And then we already have solar on a city facility at the Brentwood Park. So then we'd already be designated bronze. And then it's just adding points from there. So there's lots of ways to kind of skin the cat.
okay.
Need a motion or anything, or?
I think we just need a motion to move forward. I don't think this has to go to the board since it's operational.
So I'll make a motion that the city participate in the Soul Smart program.
Second.
Comments, questions? Favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thanks, Eric.
The next is the YMCA MOU. So the YMCA has used Memorial Parks in 2016, and ultimately, when we first started, it was more of a, hey, you know, let's talk about what you guys are using, and kind of came up with a fee, and it's kind of gone through 3 executive directors. So now, you know, we're on with Lena, and so we thought really it's time to kind of maybe formalize, codify the agreement and do more of an MOU. So that's what we've tried to do. And basically what we did, I know there's a question, so I'll go through this quickly. I gave Alderman Wade the quick rundown. But the idea is that when I talked to my staff about, hey, what does the Y usually do on a regular basis? I was told the pavilion every day for 10 weeks, the inline rink for 3 weeks, the basketball court for 4 weeks, and the sand volleyball for a week. And so then I was like, okay, well, do they use it all day? They use it 9 to 3? Like, oh no, they usually only use this for 2 hours, this for 6 hours, things like that. So that's what I did to get my 6850. And then what Alderman Weggie did was get the exact days they're using. And so the difference was primarily that there's a few days they're not using it in each week. And I'm not sure if that was, they just set up with my staff, hey, we're going to do this week, and just didn't tell us, or vice versa. Maybe my staff didn't inform me. Either way, it's about $800 delta. And then what I was trying to do is take that and really kind of figure out a fee that was going to work for the next 4, 5, 6 years. So when I looked at the 7,500 in my recommendation, it was more of the fact that it was 6,800, but I knew we're also recommending, coming up next, fee increases in the pavilions, which would add $1,000. We'll be doing more fee increases in the future. And so try to keep them in a level where they could basically say, hey, this is our fee every year. We know what we're going to do. In talking with Alderman Weggie before the meeting, the other option is we sit down with them beforehand and say, hey, here is what you're going to use every year, or hour by hour, things like that. And then does the committee want to give some sort of a discount? We are giving them a discount now based on, while we have them for this facility, they kind of take over Memorial Park. We get not complaints, but we get basically people like, I stay away from Memorial Park 10 weeks, the Y is over there and things like that. Alderman Weggie asked if how they do with trash and things like that, and that changes year to year because it really depends on their staff, and their staff changes dramatically year to year. I will say, as I told Alderman Weggie, the last few years with Lena, she's also had a camp counselor, primary camp counselor has been there for 2 years now, and they've done a really nice job training staff and making sure that their staff is doing their jobs. But, you know, that is from time to time, you know, when they don't have the same volleyball court, they still might take a group over there and do sandcastles. Okay, we understand that. And so it's trying to do something that they're a great partner. We love having them in there. You know, I think we're trying to be a good partner with them as well, and what is maybe best for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, I think the MOU is a great thing because I think there was some confusion about are they renting the entire park and other people are allowed to come in. So I think, you know, writing down what the agreement is great. And I think one thing to me is I absolutely don't think we should be charging them more than what it costs. But I know that the Y has a desire to know what it's going to cost in the future so they can budget, right? They're going to be setting next year's summer camp rates and they need to know how much it is. But I also think, you know, they are training their staff. I think I would be in favor of even adding in the MOU the expectation that there will be no litter when they leave, or, you know, what can we put back on them? Because they have paid staff that they're using there already, and if there's a way to make it a little easier on them. I also asked, just out of curiosity, what percentage of their attendees are Brentwood residents, and it's about 15% of the campers are Brentwood residents. So this seems like another one where, you know, we're kind of like double dipping on our residents a little bit in some respects. So, I mean, I would like to, you know, verify how many hours. I mean, the inline rink, the basketball court, and the volleyball, we charge by the hour. If they're not using them, then nothing is stopping somebody from just going down there and playing basketball. So they shouldn't be paying for that, in my opinion. I think we should lock in the hours, and I think the fact that they're taking on the trash and their training deserves some kind of almost discount because they are taking that off of staff. And for wear and tear on the park, as part of the MOU, you know, they're rotating around to try and minimize that, which is not an expectation we would have for just day-to-day renters on that. So I think that helps us. I don't know. I think we can help them, and I think that's fair for the city of Brentwood on this as well.
We could. I mean, we could go hour by hour, and then if the committee says, hey, hour by hour with a 40% discount, 50%, whatever it is, that could just be written in MOU. The only difficult thing with that is they wouldn't know. I mean, they'd probably know. They'd have a general idea what their hours would be, and we could help them out with that. We'd know by this time what we're thinking of as far as fee increases. So I think we'd be able to work with them if that's the route that we want to go.
I think the MOU probably should include some sort of category of agencies, entities, because this is a discount, so to speak, isn't it? That we would offer them if we
Well,
don't
I would
charge them
propose
completely?
that.
So
as it stands
think
right now, we're
I
not.
think it should say that because we are liable to hear from others wanting a discount because there are, I mean, this is the capital of all of the exercise places, and a number of them use our facilities as well. I know there's yoga in Brentwood Park. There's Her Strong at the fire station. And I don't know that any one of those are paying, or are they paying? Or asking, they're just asking for permission to use the space.
Yeah, and that goes to something we're going to talk about later is solicitation within the parks and what we allow, what we don't allow. And most places don't allow people to utilize your park system for, you know, for profit. But I mean, ultimately, if we start with this MOU with the Y, we could then utilize it for other, we could go make it other people if that's what we want to do.
I mean, it's a tricky situation because I see what you're alluding to, that it could open up Pandora's box for any other entity that has a camp that wants to leverage the park system. Are we now, you know, passing that along to everybody who wants to do that? I sort of disagree with you in that if they rent the facility but don't end up using it, that anybody can just, that takes it off of our potential of renting it to somebody else. If they're renting it and they don't go and use it, then, yeah, anybody, if it's not being used, somebody can just walk in and use it, but that doesn't mean that another entity that may want to rent it at that time could rent it. Sort of, so,
And I would ask, are they reserving it or not? I agree with you if they're reserving it, but if they're not reserving it, and maybe that hasn't been formalized that much.
Yeah, and that would be the thing. I mean, if we go the hour by hour, there's one other option, and I hate to throw another thing on top of this, but if we wanted, the idea of the MOU was to give them a flat fee, and the flat fee, that way they knew what they were gonna pay year after year. If you're interested in doing more of a hour by hour, if they're interested in doing it, we do have in our policy and procedures, the affiliated user group policy. And basically, depending on different scoring standards and things like that, you would either get a 25% or 50% discount off your rental rates for the facilities. So that would be more of a one-to-one rental thing. And off the top of my head, some of it is, are you doubling up a service that the city's currently offering? And the answer is no, we don't run a traditional gay camp. Are there other benefits you can offer to the city of Brentwood? How the percentage of residents that are in your program and things like that. And so maybe instead of doing a flat fee, we could run that affiliated user group status through, see if that's what they're more interested in. And it'd be, I'd see, we haven't had one in a while, so I'd have to go through the matrix again. But I think they get 25% easily and may qualify for 50%. It's what like the Junior Eagles used to do when they rented the ball fields down at the sports complex. So, I mean, could do that. It'd be a completely different thing. But if the Y is more interested in a true hour by hour cost, that might be the better way to go.
Sorry, Nancy.
Go ahead.
In terms, this MOU is for this year, right? They're 3 weeks into their camp already, so I guess there isn't an urgency because we're just going to figure this out at some point. And
Yeah, I
they're
mean,
gonna
we
pay
have a
whatever
good
it is, right?
relationship with them, and we know we've worked with them a number of times, so I'm not worried about whether or not anyone's going to be too terribly upset this year. So we want to make sure we do this the right way for this year and for next year, and for future years.
Well, I would say if there's some sort of program that you have, this
Affiliated user group.
affiliated user group that you already have established, I think that's good. If we're just randomly giving someone a discount for renting our park space, I think that sets up a terrible domino precedent, as our city administrator said. So I think that if there's a way to work with them as like an affiliated partner, and it does make more sense financially, it seems like that would be a win.
I can have the conversation with Lena. If it makes sense, we can just go through the process. I can give you guys the update next month. And if they really want to go more of the traditional MOU route, we can have further discussions of that and bring that back next month. I feel bad I didn't think about this until right this second. Sorry. We've been busy in
Ideas come out
Parks
of
and
these
Rec.
meetings every
That's
once in a
right,
while.
yes.
Okay, everybody okay with that? All right, thanks, Eric.
So next is, I believe, is fee recommendations. We do this every year. We are recommending some fee increases this year, and it really comes down to what we are seeing across the board. It's really no different than what you guys are seeing, is the increase in the CPI and really staffing costs, especially for part-time staff. So to try to make sure we maintain that and be able to provide the same type of services we're providing. In talking with our staff, our recommendation, what hopefully you see, is while there are some changes to resident, we see a lot of non-resident usage in our facilities, and we had been kind of at a 25% increase for non-resident to resident to non-resident, and our recommendations based on what you see is really moving that to about a 50%. And so really then trying to keep the resident rate low, still earn some more revenue for things like part-time staffing and increases in commodities, and we think that would be a way to kind of move. It also, when you think about the event pavilion, is primarily resident. It's 73% use our resident rental, so our residents are using that. The playground 60-40 non-resident. And if we change that, do we make some more money? Yes. And do we give maybe more chances for residents to use it? Because that has been a very popular place, probably. So we kind of see it as a balance of both those things. The ice rink is, more than anything else, to stay up with the rest of the market. We are still well below Centene and Maryville, which is what we'd like to be. All the municipal rinks have said, Centene and Maryville first said, like when they first said, like, we're going to set it at $375 and everyone will raise up to us because they'll know they can make that money. And ours like, well, no, we're going to keep it here because we will make that money and we'll keep those people instead of going to Centene and Maryville, and we've been able to do that. So those are recommendations, and that we'll be building into our budget if they get approved.
So I have a question. The park pavilion rentals are really a steep increase. It goes for for residents, $40 per day to $50 per hour. Is that?
I'm sorry, that's a typo. That's still
okay,
day.
That's
I'm
per
sorry.
day. Okay, great.
Yep.
Because I'm like, that just seemed that one of all of the rest.
Yep.
With that change, I think that this seems very reasonable.
Sorry, typo. What's Kevin say? Scribner's error? Can I use that?
Do you need a motion to approve the,
Yes, please.
I'll do a motion to approve the FY '25 fee recommendations for Parks and Recreation. Does it need to be forwarded onto the full board for approval? No? Okay.
I'll second.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. This one.
Yeah.
So in the past, the Y had requested tents for their summer program. We checked with SEMA and they said, yes, even temporary structures required a no-rise certification. And then she further clarified recently that if our zoning code did not include the allowance of temporary structures in the floodplain section, that we should not even have been allowing them to begin with. So this could also impact Brentwood Days. It's for any structure, whether temporary or permanent, within any floodplain. So we are looking to, at the July 10th, have a temporary section, their recommended language for any temporary structures allowance in the zoning code as a text amendment. If we don't properly get the no-rise, that would impact the city's ability for reimbursement for any damage of any future. They have reported that FEMA has paid over $33 million to Brentwood to date in the past, and all of those funding, and any future funding could be in danger. So.
So, I mean, it seems like this has wide impact, not just, I mean, I think the YMCA was the first, like, canary in the coal mine on this.
Yeah.
Brentwood Days, I mean, setting up the bandstand for Brentwood Beats on Friday, does that require a no-rise certificate?
All of the
certification?
Brentwood Days we are looking at a no-rise for all of those activities, the carnival rides, the stage, the tents. We have reached out to Jacobs to start that analysis for us. Yeah.
And with this change, does that mean that the need for the no-rise certification goes away if we allow?
No, it's still required for any structure. The text amendment allows for temporary structures within the floodplain with the specifications that SEMA has provided with us, that there be an emergency plan, and that a no-rise is still required.
You hit it on the head. There are operational issues that make absolutely no sense. Eric, you wanted to speak to that?
Yeah, obviously, my first concern was Brentwood Days as well. I don't know how you're going to get a no-rise when you put in 10 to 12 carnival rides, tents, if the tents are considered, because everything has rise. Now, luckily, Jacobs is much smarter than I am, and hopefully they'll be able to work us through that. The good news is one of the things I think Whitney clarified is that if it's a like if it's put up and taken out in the same day, there's no issue with that, primarily because I guess it's easily movable. So when you think about, my concern was anytime we put a pop-up tent for an event, I was going to have to do no rise. Secondarily, the Brentwood Summer Beats, we technically are above floodplain, base floodplain elevation, so anything on the event lawn should be okay. But it is what's going to happen with
Not
Brentwood
right
Days.
now. I mean, according to the flood maps,
That's true. I'd have to look at
I
the
mean,
flood maps
reality
again.
and maps don't
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
agree.
Because I'm looking at the Jacobs, what it's going to be, you're right. So that is a good point, except for, hopefully, since it'll be out the same night, then that will get us through.
I mean, anything though. I mean, a microbrew in the, event lawn, any kind of like, anything, I mean, anywhere this would be a thing.
Yeah, trust me, it keeps me up at night right now. The cyst in my eye right now, I think, is because of this, what we just found out. So a lot of stress right now, because Brentwood Days is the biggest concern for me right now. So, because I don't want to be the one to come back and say, we can't have Brentwood Days. So I'll make Whitney do that.
So on the no-rise certification like form, it asks for an elevation, and the Y, I was under the impression they needed to do a full, land survey to get that elevation. Is that a requirement? Or is
No,
it just
it's
finding
not.
out what the elevation is?
Right, yeah, when they first talked to us, they talked to us about a survey, and it's like, no, you don't need a survey of your whole property. We know it's in the floodplain. This would be a elevation survey is what I believe the engineer is talking about.
So just finding out what the elevation is.
Getting the elevations, because where they want to put it, the map does show it's in the floodway.
Yeah, it's like area A.
Yeah.
And, I mean, can we just use, on property viewer, their contour maps and everything that reveal the elevation? Is that acceptable, or do you have to do a?
Yeah,
an
it would be
elevation
for us, yes.
Okay, well,
Are there other structures around the city that are impact, like the snow cone stand? Is that out of the, like, I'm just thinking of other,
We would need to really look at everything.
yeah.
Even where we park during Brentwood Days. I mean, this changes everything.
We had some conversation earlier, and again, this is still early on, but some of the things that are concerning is, one of the recommendations is having a emergency plan, and that would state that if impending weather's coming in, we'd have to cancel and get everything out. Well, to do that for carnival rides, you need 48 hours. So we'd be canceling on Wednesday for Brentwood Days, and then if something were to happen, it just tweaks a little bit north and we don't get any rain whatsoever. That's my customer service and fear right now is those type of things. Hopefully Jacobs will be able to say, this is what you have to do, and it won't be a big deal. But again, there's lots of things we're worried about at this present moment.
questions, so.
So you need a motion for the text amendment. I mean, we have to move forward with,
Does P and Z bring the text amendment to us? Oh,
P and Z makes the recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. I know y'all wanted to hear this tonight, so I included it here. So yes, if you're looking for if you would like to provide a recommendation, yeah.
it seems to me that we
Gonna-
don't really have much of a choice. We have
you
to
don't.
kind of see this
And we're
through.
asking for first and second when it goes to the board.
Yeah,
on the same
I
note.
mean, this is a pretty significant impact, and I don't think we can lose the support of SEMA and FEMA as it relates to all of our areas that are impacted by flooding. I guess I'll make a motion to proceed with the drafting of the text amendment, and taking it to the July 10th Planning and Zoning Commission.
Second.
All right, any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right.
You have to say it was for first and second reading.
No.
Yes, first and second
Yeah.
at the board.
Well, that
After it comes out of
comes out of
P&Z.
P&Z.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll
Do you need
you'll
that in the
deal with
motion?
that
We'll get
No,
it then.
okay.
when it goes there, yeah.
Okay, next is item D, the spot survey.
So this is also recently have come up. A house received approval for new construction. When it was at the Architectural Review Board, it showed the correct setbacks. They changed the setbacks during the building permitting phase and didn't tell us. The house was built at 5 feet rather than 8 of the side yard setback. We are requesting any future new construction to provide a spot survey at the time of the foundations in place so that we can prevent this in the future. However, if someone were to say, show me in the code where it is, that's required, we don't currently have that. So we are looking for approval of the text amendment to make it a requirement.
So I'll make a motion that the draft ordinance requiring a spot survey for new construction as part of Section 500 is forwarded on to the Board of Aldermen for review.
So this would be, they would have to do the spot survey, or is this just give you the ability to request one?
We can request it. This gives us the ability to require it. All of the new homes are tending to be built right at the setbacks, so we would like to request it to begin with.
Will be required.
Yeah,
So
so it
everybody
would be,
will
this
have to
would
do a
now
spot.
be
They will
have
required.
to do it.
Yeah,
And how intensive is a spot survey? Is that,
It's just it's not a full survey of the whole outside property. It would be just survey from your setback lines, from your property lines.
it's not extensive, yeah.
I
But
mean, is
it's
this,
addition, it's
is
new.
this a,
Will be an additional cost for the builder, but
I'm worried, are we over-rotating because of one-time deal?
This
or
has
is this?
happened more than once. This happened on Madge, I believe. Yeah.
So we met with the mayor, and did he attend the meeting? P&Z?
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't. But obviously, it impacts the neighbors. And so this is the only way that we can ensure that we're educating the builders so that this doesn't happen again. Because ordinarily, in other cities, we've heard from our zoning council that those cities have requested that those homes be torn down. We did not do that.
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, had we made that house be torn down, it would have stopped it, but we
Yes.
didn't do that. So
Right.
I think doing this is a way to stop it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? I guess all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks.
thank you.
Dan, sidewalk?
We had a person come in that lives at 9140 White. They had a sewer lateral that we reimbursed, and while he was at our Public Works building, he asked about a sidewalk. He's the only home in this stretch of White, on the south side of White between Stratford and St. Clair, that has a sidewalk. The other homes on either side of him don't have sidewalks. So his question was, could he remove the sidewalk or have us remove it so he could have green space just like the neighbors? So I had looked at it. I mean, the sidewalk's exposed aggregate. It's probably original to the home. The home dates back to like 1930. It could be fixed on the west end. There's holes in it basically where it's deteriorated, but it could be socket out, put new forms, pour concrete, you'd be done. So the question becomes, do we want to remove it as he requested or just fix what's there? And then as the other sites, possibly infill homes develop, you would require them to add sidewalks, or later on we try to add sidewalks? Those are the two options I came up with.
Nancy?
Okay, so this is, this is near me. It's not even a full sidewalk in front of his house. It goes from the east side, but then the house to the west, there's sidewalk, a little grass,
stops.
and then the neighbor's driveway. There's green, there are trees all along here. If we actually required people as houses maybe someday got torn down to put in sidewalk, I just think it's gonna be a really long time. They also face the track and the parking at the high school. So there is ample walking space on the north. When there aren't cars there, it's even really wide because you can walk where the cars park. I mean, I think we should tear it up and And I don't really see replacing it. It's a mess now. Something needs to be done because it is really messy, so.
I concur. Sounds like a motion and a second there.
To ask staff to proceed with removing the sidewalk in front of 9140 White Avenue.
Second, sorry.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, tearing down buildings.
All right, this one's pretty
Tearing up
straightforward.
sidewalks, tearing down buildings.
2818 Breckenridge Industrial, that's the former Bowser House. We had bid packages returned to us on June 11th. We've got 5 results here, ranging from 75,000 all the way to 156,000. So 2 of them are below what we had placed in the FEMA approval at 100,000. So called references in on Tubbs and Son Construction. They've done work for Maryland Heights, Hazelwood, Berkeley, Ferguson. I had like 5 cities all have favorable responses, said they'd hire them again. Some are in the process of hiring them again. So the recommendation was to hire Tubbs and Son. We'll present that at the Monday board meeting, and then we can do notice to proceed hopefully real soon and get that building torn down. And I also had included like a contingency because we weren't sure on what the Webster Grove's fee would be for the permit, since it's in Webster Grove, so we put in the 10% contingency.
So I'll make a motion that we approve Tubbs and Son Construction for the demolition of 2818 Breckenridge Industrial Court, the amount of $82,500.
Second. All right, any other comments, questions?
I have a question. So on the FEMA money, so we had $100,000 for this line item.
Right.
So do we get do we get reimbursed the 82.5, or do we get the other money that we could then use for our other project, or other things? Or do you know?
What we got approved was our list of 14, 16 things at 1.7. So I'll tell you that some things are going to be under budget, some things, like the police cars, are already going to be over. Okay. The real question that I will have, if we're $50,000 under, they did approve our whole list because we talked about, hey, I'll give you these just in case you disapprove one of them. And so, hey, I was like, look, we got through all of these 14. We still have 50,000. This one's 45,000. Can we go ahead? I don't know the answer to that yet, but I want to see how everything plays out. But at least I have that in my kind of my back pocket.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Park rules.
All right, last. So we're looking at revising Chapter 225 for a couple of reasons. One is, while we had park rules, we've always had park rules, they weren't in our code. We had a very small section about park rules in the code. And again, the police department, talking to the police department, they say they have a lot. It's easier to enforce than you say, hey, section 225.040 says you can't do this. It gives them a little bit more teeth, is what Major Simpson likes to say. So we went through, we looked at a lot of different policies and rules from a lot of different cities and things like that. Talked about things we wanted. The police department gave us a couple as well. And that's what you see in front of you. So I do know there was one question about park hours. And so just to kind of talk about that real quick is when you look, most cities, their code is either sunrise to sunset. There's a few that say, hey, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. They give specific hours. But there's not one that really talks about facilities like trails that really allow that. And the reason why there's been discussion about this in across the field is that if you invite people to use something, then you have to make sure that it is safe and secure. And so with trails, that means we'd have to light those trails if we're going to invite people to use those trails after dark. So that is the consideration. That's why we don't say things like that. If the police, really comes down to enforcement. If they don't enforce it, no harm, no foul. But if we are the ones that say, yes, you can use this, and we really have to look at securing those things specifically with lights.
Okay, so that's more of an implication of liability and the capital cost of what that, you know, if you designate the trail system as accessible at any time, then you've got to have, do you by law have to have those things in place?
I couldn't tell if there's case law out there. I'd have to talk to Kevin a little bit about that one. That is just in conversations at conferences and, talking to other directors, things like that. Case law, I couldn't give you the exact case law. I could
Yeah,
find that
no, I
out for you.
understand. I mean, again, I think it's in our code, if we've got something in there that we know we're not going to enforce, I mean, the mayor runs in the morning, that's probably before the sun's up along Rogers Parkway in the park. Are we going to start saying, nope, you're not supposed to be here? I mean, the trail system that we have, people use when it gets dark to walk their dogs and ride their bikes. And, we're going to now put in the code that, I mean, we've had it in the code probably, but I just find it interesting that we can't somehow carve off the trails as being modes of transportation and accessibility throughout our city at all and at any time.
Yeah, I mean, the old code, you can see it there, it was sunrise 1/2 hour after sunset for the whole park system, except for Hanley and Brentwood Park, which was the old sports complex. So we had needed to change that anyway. So at that time, our code didn't allow it. We could, depending on, I mean, ultimately, if we want to move forward on this, we could approve this, and then I can do some more research. If we need to revise the code, I could always bring back a revision. Or we can go the other way and say, when you look at the top line, say, with exception of special use facilities such as athletic complex, amphitheater, I could put trails there. And that just kind of gives it the sort of caveat that trails are allowed. That's a very simple change to it that we could do. And then I could figure out what the implications are.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to open ourselves up to, again, you pull on a thread and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we didn't know that was going to happen. And yeah, right, so, but I just feel like if we're going to go through the effort of cleaning up the code and modifying it, it is an amenity that allows citizens to sort of get some exercise. I know I use it at night. Alderman Weggie walking his dog at night. In the wintertime, it gets dark 5 o'clock at night, and you're going to say people can't be on Rogers Parkway. It just seems.
But what is your thought about Brentwood Park? There are trails in there.
Yeah, Brentwood, again, still,
They're allowed
I see people
there as well.
running and biking, and it's not daylight hours,
I mean, I think this is not about the ordinance, but if you think about GRG, they don't put any lights on their trails. That one specifically would be difficult because you put infrastructure down where it floods 5, 6, 10 times a year. We're replacing that infrastructure a lot. That is the biggest complaint we get about Brentwood Parks. How come you don't have benches down there? Well, because...
Does the GRG say you can't be on the GRG trails from a certain time to a certain time?
If I remember correctly, most of them are sunrise to sunset, but ultimately they turn over the operation of the trail to the municipality for which it's in. So it really goes to that municipality's ordinances of when it can be used.
Maybe we add a disclosure. When you do it at your own risk.
Well, and I'll say, like, Rogers Parkway is almost like a sidewalk in your neighborhood. Right. And that's different to me than, like, all the way down in Brentwood Park. So I like, Brentwood Park is a large park, and Rogers Parkway is more like, I mean, they're both paths. And I used to run early in the morning all the time and went down all the parks in wards 2 and 3 in the dark, and that was safer to me than running on the street. So, I don't want something where, like, a lot of times I think people don't run on the sidewalks because they're uneven, so then they're running in the street. But I don't want to do something where we have these nice park paths and we're sending people to the street. But
I think that when you think about an ordinance like this, you're really worried about people loitering there after hours.
Right.
Right? When you think about parks, do we really consider Rogers Parkway a park? I mean, I always call it a linear park because it really is just a trail. Even Lee Wynn Trail is designated a trail. I mean, ultimately, if we go that reference, that really Rogers Parkway, Lee Wynn Trail, and even parts of, well, it would,
With the trails,
it
but
would be
yeah, just not.
the Sycamore
in Swim
Trail,
Club Lane.
right, the Sycamore Trail is a trail, not part of the park.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of the end around, which is really that what you call a trail, Sycamore, all of our other trails throughout the city, those trails and Lee Wynn and Rogers Parkway really aren't parks. Those are trails, so those would have a little bit latitude.
Yeah, and I would say paved trails, I don't think we want to, like, I think we would want to have the ability for the police to enforce people in our nature trails in, we don't want all hours of night, people in the woods there.
Yeah.
I would totally be supportive of that. I think it's the paved multi-use trails. If there's a way to do that that doesn't create problems, I think that makes it clearer.
I mean, we could, so with the exception of special use facilities such as athletic complex, amphitheater, multi-use trails, and in multi-use paved trails,
Yeah,
and in instances of special events.
I'd be comfortable with those adjustments.
It really is, because, the officers are dedicated, even though they do ride from the station to Brentwood Park. Now you add all these other trails, how do they really patrol that at night? Wasn't this primarily designed for night? Right?
Yes, I mean, the impetus of this is the fact that we don't want people loitering in the parks.
And the chief says they chase people out every night.
Well,
That's
but
loitering, though.
that's in the park and the pavilion area, and I get that. The trails that run along the system, they're not necessarily hanging out and loitering, I think that's not the problem areas, and I guess the ordinance should focus on where the problem areas are.
The park, the pavilion.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
the
I mean, it
park
sounds like
that-
it's a problem with loitering,
the lot.
not walking along the path.
Right.
They walk along the path if you want to get technical about it. But I do agree, it should be specific to places where they do loiter. And maybe there's no rush to this, we can take it back, given your feedback, and share it with the chief and his staff, and bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the reason to do it, why we were turning this is we want to put signage up. The police department wants us to put signage up. If it waits another month, is it the end of the world? No. That will give me time for case law and things like that. Talk to Kevin, or Kevin's out of town, so someone else in his firm. So we could do all that and then bring it back in July.
Yeah, Nancy?
Oh, I have two other things. So under number S, duties of parents, I think you're getting at loitering and idling, but if you take those words out, it reads, it's unlawful for the parent, guardian, or other adult person having the care and custody of a minor under the age of 17 to knowingly permit such minor to wander, stroll, or play in city parks. So I think you meant loiter and idle, but I think we want our parents to allow the kids to play in city park. Maybe you mean alone, or maybe you mean, I know you're getting at loitering, but.
I'll tell you that one was a specific police one.
Okay.
They gave me that one. I can talk to them a little bit more because I think what they're looking for is basically letting your 3-year-old run out while you're sitting in the pavilion talking, and letting your 3-year-old run and get lost. And so I think we can probably clean that one up a little bit more.
It seems like there's a guard, I don't know, it just seems
Yeah.
like there's language. And then my last question, or my other second question, last one is, under U, it talks about drone usage. What if it's a city-owned drone? Does that just not count because it's our drone?
Typically, yes, but I could put something in there that says, except for city, yeah.
Authorate, yeah.
Yeah, so I could do that.
Yeah, I have a couple comments too. I mean, back to the trail thing. I mean, the reality is we've worked really hard to make this a walkable community, and the trails are the only way to get from some neighborhoods to other neighborhoods. I mean, we had this whole conversation about low-speed vehicles, of how you can't get from here to there without being on the trail. And so I think we got to figure that out a little bit better. I mean, the only way off of that is either walk all the way down to Manchester and back up, or take the path, right? So But then in section J, there's a couple. So one, there's a duplication, 4 and 5 are the same. But I kind of get the intent of that, but also like, if somebody's running for mayor, they can't go around and introduce themselves at Brentwood Days, if that's the new rule.
I think what we're trying to get to, I mean, without the written consent, is basically what we're trying to say is that the director can basically say it's okay. What we don't want is someone just to kind of come out, start petitioning people with either petitions or, flyers or things like that, and upset their usage of the park. So
Get that, but it just seems like, we're trying to solve a problem that could create more problems, right?
I mean, look at that.
I mean, I don't know, we're a small town, and that's just kind of the way it works. I mean, I know when I ran, I walked around and introduced myself to people at Brentwood Beats and stuff, so like, I don't know. And then number 6, I think, is kind of the same thing. We have a lot of yoga classes and stuff that are like running through the park. This would mean they can't do that, or they
No,
can't work
because
out?
basically what we're saying here is that, again, is that what we don't want is someone to basically say, I'm gonna run my own class in a park, make money off this beautiful new facility. Because we've had some people already try that, like, hey, you love Brentwood Park? I'm gonna do a music class in the amphitheater every Tuesday for $30 a class. And that's what we're trying to get, while we shouldn't be able to do that, we want to make sure it's specifically clear in our code. So when I go talk to these people and say, hey, it is an ordinance, you're not allowed to do that. We'd love to have you in our fold. You can be a contractual class. We'll run it through our program and work with those people.
I mean, what about if like a CrossFit group just takes a run down the path? Does that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think, there's always the gray line. You have to kind of take a look. It's a good example, like Girls on the Run. That is kind of a class where they show up, they do a quick run, they're out. I think we're okay with things like that. It is the ones where, hey, you come here, we're going to teach you how to. There's a lot of there's been issues, not so much here, but in other cities, about boot camps and how they take over a park and make tons of money off your facility, and you don't see a dime of that.
Okay, those are my 2 feedbacks on those items.
We will revise this and we can have more discussion next month.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. We are in the item 10, citizen comment. Who would
No comments online.
All right, seeing no new business, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks.